You found the Stealth Podcast. Tonight, we'll travel through dark and lonely stories. Where in the world are you watching from? What time is it there? Subscribe and leave your like to support us. Let's begin. I never thought my decision to embrace the van life would lead me to the darkest night of my existence. My name is Mason Caldwell, 34 years old, and I call Portland home. Or at least I did before converting my 2012 Sprinter into a mobile sanctuary 6 months ago. The freedom was intoxicating at first, waking up to different horizons, answering to no landlord, documenting my travels for my modest but growing social media following. The van wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Solar panels, a compact kitchen, and a surprisingly comfortable bed platform that converted to a workspace during daylight hours. The New York leg of my East Coast tour was supposed to be the highlight. I'd planned to stay upstate for a week before venturing into the city, meeting up with fellow nomads I'd connected with online. Ella and Darius had been living the van life for 3 years, their vintage Volkswagen bus instantly recognizable from their popular YouTube channel. We'd agreed to meet at a diner in Albany before convoying toward the city together. "You're gonna love this spot in Queens," Darius had insisted over lukewarm coffee, his tattooed arms animatedly describing a hidden parking area near an abandoned industrial zone. Totally off the radar, man. No security, no nosy neighbors, and the cell reception is decent enough to upload content. Ella nodded enthusiastically, her platinum blonde hair falling across her face as she showed me pinned locations on her phone. There was something almost predatory in the way they exchanged glances, but I chalked it up to my own exhaustion after the long drive from Maine. The three of us hit the road as afternoon shadows lengthened across the highway. My Sprinter followed their colorful bus, which bore the weathered stickers of national parks and music festivals, badges of nomadic honor. We skirted Manhattan's congestion, taking a series of increasingly narrow and deteriorating streets through industrial zones I'd never find on my own. The unsettling feeling in my gut intensified as we ventured deeper into a labyrinth of warehouses, many with shattered windows staring like hollow eyes into the deepening dusk. "This is it," I muttered to myself as we pulled into what must have once been a loading area for a massive brick building, its faded signage suggesting it had manufactured textiles sometime last century. The space was bordered by overgrown chain-link fences topped with rusted barbed wire, providing a disturbing sense of enclosure. Several other vans and converted buses were already parked in a loose semicircle, their inhabitants gathered around a small fire pit that cast distorted shadows against the building's facade. Darius made introductions as I stepped from my van, the crisp October air carrying the scent of burning wood and something else, something metallic and unpleasant that I couldn't quite identify. "Everyone, this is Mason, first-timer in our little sanctuary." 6 faces turned toward me with varying expressions of welcome, but one man remained seated, his back to me as he poked at the fire. The hairs on my neck stood on end when he finally turned, revealing a face half covered in elaborate tattoos that seemed to writhe in the flickering firelight. "Welcome to the family," he said, his voice surprisingly soft and cultured for someone with such an intimidating appearance. "We've been waiting for some fresh blood." The group laughed a bit too enthusiastically at what I assumed was an inside joke, but the knot in my stomach tightened as I forced a smile. Something about the way they all watched me, like I was a specimen under glass, made me wish I'd trusted my instincts and found a Walmart parking lot instead. As night descended completely, the gathering grew more animated. Someone produced bottles of homemade moonshine that burned all the way down, and stories were shared about the road. Yet beneath the camaraderie, I noticed odd details. Hushed conversations that ceased when I approached, mysterious glances toward my van, and the occasional mention of the ritual followed by knowing smiles. I told myself I was being paranoid, that this was just how established communities operated. But when I excused myself to return to my van for a jacket, I could have sworn I heard Ella whisper, "Perfect timing. This one's ideal." I woke with a jolt around 3 a.m., disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings until I remembered where I'd parked. The industrial lot was eerily silent, too silent. The gentle hum of conversation and laughter that had lulled me to sleep was gone, replaced by a vacuum of sound that felt deliberately imposed. Instinctively, I reached for my phone. Dead. which was impossible considering I'd charged it fully before turning in. The power bank connected to my solar setup was also drained, another impossibility that sent a cold wave of dread washing over me. Peering through my blackout curtains, I noticed the other vans were still there, but the fire pit was extinguished, no signs of life visible anywhere. Something was off about their positioning, though. They'd moved sometime after I'd gone to bed, now arranged in what appeared to be a perfect circle with my Sprinter at the center. My throat tightened. This wasn't random. Vehicles don't rearrange themselves in the middle of the night. Someone had orchestrated this while I slept, and the precision of it was deeply unsettling. I debated my options: start the engine and get the hell out of there, potentially making myself a target if these people meant harm, or wait until morning when I could assess the situation more clearly. The rational part of my brain argued that there must be a reasonable explanation. Maybe this was some weird van life tradition, an initiation ritual for newcomers. But the primal part, the part that recognizes danger before we consciously understand it, was screaming at me to flee. A soft tapping on my side door froze me mid-thought. 3 gentle knocks, precisely spaced, followed by silence. I held my breath, hoping whoever it was would assume I was asleep and leave. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. "Mason." Ella's voice was barely audible, a hoarse whisper that seemed deliberately pitched not to travel. "Mason, please. I need to talk to you. You're in danger." Against my better judgment, I cracked the door open, keeping the security chain fastened. Ella's face was transformed from the confident, carefree woman I'd met earlier. Her eyes were wide with fear, darting nervously over her shoulder every few seconds. "You need to leave," she hissed. "Now, while they're preparing. The others brought you here for a reason. I thought I could go through with it again, but I can't. Not after meeting you." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice a harsh whisper. "What reason?" Ella glanced behind her again, clearly terrified of being overheard. "The gathering happens twice a year. They need an offering. Someone who won't be immediately missed. Solo travelers are perfect." Her words hung in the space between us, monstrous implications sinking into my consciousness with nauseating clarity. Before I could respond, headlights swept across the lot as another vehicle approached. Ella's face contorted with panic. "Too late. Listen carefully. There's an emergency exit through the old loading docks behind the building. The fence is cut there. Get to it when they're distracted with the new arrival. Run. Don't stop until you hit the main road." With that, she melted into the shadows between the vans, leaving me alone with the horrifying revelation. My hands shook as I quietly gathered essentials: wallet, keys, jacket, and the tactical flashlight I kept beside my bed. Starting the van would alert everyone, but on foot I might have a chance. The approaching vehicle, a mud-splattered pickup truck, pulled into the lot and cut its engine. 2 figures emerged, greeting the tattooed man who seemed to materialize from nowhere to meet them. I couldn't hear their conversation, but their body language suggested familiarity, conspiracy. I seized the moment of distraction to silently slip out the passenger side door of my van, keeping low as I crept along the perimeter of the lot toward the hulking shadow of the building. My heart hammered so violently I feared they might hear it in the stillness of the night. The moonlight exposed me more than I'd like, casting my elongated shadow across the cracked concrete. 20 feet to the building. 15. 10. A sudden chorus of shouts erupted behind me. They discovered my escape. The sound of multiple car doors slamming punctuated the night, followed by the beam of a powerful flashlight sweeping the area. I abandoned stealth for speed, breaking into a desperate sprint toward the loading docks Ella had mentioned. I could hear footsteps pounding after me, voices calling out with chilling coordination. "Southeast corner. Cut him off at the docks. Remember, we need him alive." The loading dock loomed before me, a concrete platform elevated about 4 feet off the ground, its metal roll-up doors sealed with decades of rust. I scrambled up, my palms scraping against the rough surface, adrenaline numbing the pain. To my right, a narrow personnel door stood partially ajar, the escape route Ella had mentioned. Behind me, flashlight beams danced erratically as my pursuers closed in, their voices carrying an almost ritualistic rhythm as they called to each other. I slipped through the door into absolute darkness, the air inside dense with the musty perfume of abandonment and decay. My flashlight revealed a cavernous space, its floor cluttered with fallen ceiling tiles and mysterious hulking shapes draped in plastic sheeting. The weak beam caught glimpses of graffiti-covered walls and what appeared to be symbols painted in something dark and flaking. I refused to examine them closely, focusing instead on finding the exit Ella had promised. Moving deeper into the building, I became aware of sounds echoing through the emptiness. The scurrying of rats, the drip of water from ruptured pipes, and something else. A low, constant murmur that seemed to emanate from the very walls. It wasn't until I paused to catch my breath that I realized the murmuring had structure, rhythm. It was chanting. Somewhere in this labyrinth, people were engaged in some kind of ceremony, their voices rising and falling in unison. "He's inside." The shout from behind propelled me forward again, deeper into the maze of abandoned manufacturing equipment. My flashlight beam swept across something that stopped me cold. A concrete basin in the center of the room, large enough to hold a person, its surface stained with decades of what could only be blood. Around it, arranged with geometric precision, were dozens of small objects that glinted in the light. Personal effects, I realized with growing horror. Watches, rings, necklaces, all carefully positioned like offerings. The chanting grew louder as I navigated through a doorway into what must have once been an administrative area. Cubicle dividers created a bewildering maze. Many collapsed or positioned at disorienting angles. The walls here were covered with photographs, hundreds of them, showing smiling people with their vans and campers. With sickening clarity, I understood these weren't random images, but documentation. Records. Trophies. A hand closed around my ankle as I stepped over a fallen filing cabinet, yanking me to the ground with brutal force. My flashlight skittered across the floor, its beams spinning crazily before going dark as it smashed against a wall. In the newfound darkness, I kicked wildly at my unseen attacker, connecting with something solid that produced a grunt of pain. Scrambling to my feet, I ran blindly, hands outstretched to prevent collision with unseen obstacles. The circle must be completed. The voice, Darius's voice, echoed from somewhere terrifyingly close. The solstice demands tribute. Others took up the call, their voices harmonizing in a chant that seemed to pulsate with the beating of my heart. I stumbled into a stairwell, taking the steps two at a time, driven upward by the sounds of pursuit from below. The higher I climbed, the stronger the smell became, a nauseating mixture of incense, copper, and rot. The stairwell terminated at the building's third floor, where I emerged into a vast open space illuminated by candlelight. The scene before me defied comprehension. The floor had been painted with an enormous circular symbol, its intricate design incorporating what appeared to be dozens of smaller circles, each containing what I first thought were random markings, but with dawning horror recognized as license plate numbers. In the center stood a stone altar, its surface dark with stains, surrounded by figures in dark clothing, their faces obscured by crude masks fashioned from what looked like road maps. One figure turned toward me, the flickering candlelight revealing the tattooed face I'd seen earlier, now partially covered by a mask made from what I recognized as a New York State road atlas. "The final guest arrives," he announced, his voice carrying an almost theatrical quality. "Without pursuit, as it should be. They always find their way to us." The circle of masked figures parted, and I saw what lay on the altar, a freshly tattooed human skin, stretched and drying like parchment, bearing what looked like a partial map. With nauseating clarity, I realized what I was seeing. They were creating some kind of grotesque roadmap using the skin of their victims. My body reacted before my mind could fully process the horror. I bolted back toward the stairwell, only to find my path blocked by Ella and two others. Their expressions were blank, entranced, as if whatever humanity I'd glimpsed earlier had been scrubbed away. "The map requires completion," Ella intoned, her voice unnaturally flat. "Your journey ends here, but your contribution ensures others will find their way." She advanced slowly, a curved ritual knife glinting in her hand. Backing away, I frantically scanned for another escape route. The windows were boarded up, but one section looked weathered and weak. Without hesitation, I charged toward it, throwing my full weight against the rotting plywood. The barrier gave way with a splintering crack, and suddenly I was airborne, fragments of wood and rusty nails surrounding me as I plummeted toward the building's fire escape. I crashed onto the metal landing with bone-jarring force, the ancient structure groaning beneath my sudden weight. Above me, faces appeared at the jagged hole, their outraged cries spurring me downward. The fire escape zigzagged precariously down the building's facade, each step threatening to break away beneath me. When I reached the second-floor landing, the entire section above tore free from its moorings with a thunderous metallic shriek, temporarily blocking my pursuer's descent. I didn't waste the advantage, racing down the remaining stairs as the structure swayed alarmingly beneath me. My feet hit solid ground, and I sprinted toward the chain-link fence Ella had mentioned. In the darkness, it took precious seconds to locate the cut section, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Behind me, figures were pouring from the building's main entrance, spreading out to intercept me. I threw myself at the opening, feeling the jagged wire edges tear at my clothing and skin as I forced my way through, ignoring the pain in my desperation to escape. Beyond the fence lay an overgrown field bordered by dense trees, a small urban forest that had reclaimed this forgotten corner of industrial Queens. I plunged into the undergrowth, branches whipping against my face as I ran blindly through the darkness. The sound of pursuit was everywhere, crashing footsteps, urgent calls, the beam of flashlights sweeping through the trees. My lungs burned with each gasping breath, but terror drove me onward, deeper into the tangled vegetation. I lost track of time as I fled, changing direction frequently to confuse my trackers. The forest seemed to go on forever, far larger than it had appeared from outside. Disoriented and exhausted, I paused behind a massive fallen tree, straining to hear over my pounding heartbeat. The forest had gone silent. No calls, no footsteps, no flashlights. The sudden absence of pursuit was almost more terrifying than being chased. As I crouched there, trying to calm my breathing, a faint glow caught my attention through the trees. Streetlights, civilization, safety. I moved toward them cautiously, constantly checking over my shoulder, hyper-aware of every snapping twig and rustling leaf. The trees began to thin, revealing what appeared to be a residential street lined with modest homes. Relief flooded through me as I emerged from the forest's edge, only to freeze in confusion. Something was wrong. The street before me wasn't in Queens at all. The architecture, the layout, even the street signs were completely unfamiliar. In the distance, mountains rose against the night sky, mountains that definitely didn't belong anywhere near New York City. A passing car slowed as the driver noticed me standing there, bloodied and disheveled at the roadside. The vehicle's window lowered, revealing an elderly man with concerned eyes. "You all right, son? You look like you've seen hell itself." "Where am I?" I managed to croak, my voice barely functioning. The man's brow furrowed with concern. "Why, you're in Cedar Mountain, North Carolina, boy. Hospital's about 2 miles down this road if you need it." His words hit me like a physical blow. North Carolina. Impossible. I'd been in New York less than an hour ago. My knees buckled as the implications crashed over me. The old man was rushing to my aid when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Darius's voice, saying pleasantly, "Thanks for your concern, but my friend's had a rough night. I'll take care of him." The old man hesitated, clearly sensing something wrong, but social conditioning won out over instinct. "Well, if you're sure," he mumbled, returning reluctantly to his car. I wanted to scream for help, but shock had paralyzed my vocal cords. As the taillights disappeared around a bend, Darius's hand clamped firmly on my shoulder, his fingers digging into muscle with practiced precision to find a nerve cluster that sent waves of debilitating pain down my arm. "The map works perfectly," he said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "Distance means nothing when the paths are properly marked. Your contribution will be especially valuable. We've never had anyone from Portland before." My mind reeled, unable to process the impossibility of my situation. We couldn't actually be in North Carolina. This had to be an elaborate hoax, some kind of drugged hallucination or mass delusion. More figures emerged from the tree line, the entire group from the abandoned factory, still wearing their grotesque map masks. They formed a loose circle around me, maintaining a careful distance as if performing a choreographed dance. "The atlas requires balance," the tattooed leader explained, noting my confusion. "Each point connected, each traveler contributing their journey. You've traveled far." Mason Caldwell from Portland. Your essence will connect paths previously unknown. With horrifying clarity, I finally understood. The maps weren't just symbolic. Somehow, impossibly, they were functional. Using human skin as their medium, these people had created a network of supernatural pathways, doorways that connected distant locations. The abandoned factory wasn't just their gathering place. It was a nexus, a central hub in their grotesque geographic web. And I was to be the newest addition, my skin providing the connection to Portland. I made one last desperate attempt to escape, fainting left before diving right, aiming for a gap between two of the cultists. For a moment, I thought I might make it, until something tangled around my ankles, sending me crashing to the pavement. Looking down, I saw what appeared to be thin lines crawling across the ground like living ink, forming map contours that wrapped around my legs with impossible strength. "Don't fight the cartography," Ellis said softly, crouching beside me. "It's already begun to claim you." "See," she gestured toward my exposed forearm where, to my horror, fine dark lines were appearing beneath my skin, forming what looked like street grids and highway patterns. I screamed then, a sound of pure primal terror that echoed through the quiet North Carolina night. They carried me back into the forest, my struggles weakening as the map lines spread across my body, burning like acid as they etched themselves deeper. We passed through what appeared to be a shimmering distortion in the air, a doorway of sorts, and suddenly we were back in the Queen's factory, the transition instantaneous and nauseating. The altar awaited, freshly cleaned of its previous occupant, obsidian blades arranged with surgical precision. As they strapped me down, the tattooed leader leaned close, his breath hot against my ear. "Your van will be well used," he whispered. "Another traveler will drive it, following the roads you once took, gathering more for our cause." The circle continues, the map expands. I thought of my abandoned sprinter, of the carefully built interior that had been my home. Would the next victim sense the residual horror as they were lured to this same fate? The ritual began with chanting, the masked figures moving in precise patterns around the altar. The tattooed man raised the largest blade, its edge catching the candlelight as he positioned it against my chest. "With gratitude for your journey," he intoned, "we welcome your contribution to the Eternal Atlas." The blade descended, and I experienced a moment of perfect clarity, understanding that I had become just another waypoint in their supernatural geography, another junction in an ever-expanding map drawn in blood and skin. In my final moments, as consciousness began to fade, I saw something that chilled my dying soul more than the ritual itself. Through the jagged hole I'd created in my escape attempt, I could see the night sky, but not the sky of New York or North Carolina. This sky held impossible constellations, stars arranged in patterns that mirrored the symbols on the floor. The map didn't just connect places on Earth, it extended beyond, to realms I couldn't comprehend. My last thought was of all the other travelers out there, solitary nomads in their vans and RVs, seeking freedom on the open road, documenting their journeys for followers who would notice too late when the posts suddenly stopped. How many had ended beneath these blades? How many would follow? The true horror wasn't just my death, but the knowledge that it was merely a coordinate in something vast and ancient, a cartography of terror that would continue long after I became nothing more than ink on their living parchment. I never thought I'd end up living in a van at 32, but here I am, Meredith Holloway, formerly of Albuquerque, now cruising the streets of New York in my retrofitted 2015 Sprinter. 6 months ago, I had a marketing job, an apartment, and a fiancé. Now I have a composting toilet and 3 changes of clothes. The freedom was supposed to make up for everything I'd left behind. That's what I kept telling myself as I crossed into New York State last Tuesday, desperately needing a break from the constant driving. The city was overwhelming after weeks of quieter places. Honking taxis, crowds pushing past on sidewalks, buildings stretching endlessly upward. I wasn't used to any of it. My van, which had felt spacious in national parks, suddenly seemed conspicuous and oversized. Finding parking spots was a nightmare, but I'd done my research. Fellow Vanlifers had mentioned a quiet industrial area in Queens where overnight parking went largely unnoticed. As darkness fell, I navigated through unfamiliar streets until I found it. A stretch of warehouses with several empty loading zones. The area wasn't completely deserted. A few security lights hummed overhead, casting strange, elongated shadows. I backed into a spot between two dark buildings, keeping my movements quiet. I'd learned to be discreet, to avoid attracting attention. The unwritten rule of stealth camping. Arrive late, leave early, and nobody needs to know you were there. After dinner, a sad microwave meal heated on my portable stove, I heard footsteps outside. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth, and listened. Rule number 1, don't panic at normal city sounds. Just someone walking by, I told myself. But the footsteps slowed as they approached my van. Through the blackout curtains, I could see nothing, but I heard the unmistakable sound of fingers trailing along my vehicle's exterior. A chill ran down my spine as those fingers tapped gently, methodically, as if testing for something. Just checking out the van, I whispered to myself, trying to normalize the situation. People are curious about conversions, but this didn't feel like curiosity. The tapping continued along the entire length, stopping at each window, each possible entrance. I clutched my phone, finger hovering over the emergency call button. The steps finally moved away, and I exhaled shakily, deciding I was being paranoid. New York was just getting to me. Sleep came eventually, though fitful. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of hushed voices. 2, maybe 3 people, speaking in low tones outside. I lay perfectly still, straining to hear. "This one's perfect," a man's voice said. "Definitely not local. Probably got cash, electronics." My blood ran cold. I carefully reached for the baseball bat I keep beside my bed, a precaution I'd never expected to need. "Wisconsin plates," another voice noted. "Tourist. Nobody looking for them here." I realized with horror they weren't just talking about robbing me. The casual way they discussed my presumed isolation sent ice through my veins. These weren't opportunistic thieves. They sounded organized, calculating. I'd inadvertently parked in their hunting ground. My phone showed no service. Of course, metal warehouses on all sides. I cursed myself for choosing such an isolated spot. The voices grew quieter, and I heard what sounded like tools being unloaded from a bag. Metal on metal. I knew I couldn't wait to find out what they were planning. Abandoning stealth, I lunged for the driver's seat, keys already in hand. As I scrambled forward, I heard a startled shout outside. I caught a glimpse of 3 figures as I turned the ignition, 2 men and a woman, all wearing dark clothing. The woman pointed something at my van as I slammed it into reverse. I felt a hard impact. I'd hit one of them. There was no time for guilt or hesitation. I shifted into drive and floored it, tires squealing as I fled down the dark street, heart hammering in my chest. I drove aimlessly through unfamiliar streets, shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. After 15 minutes of random turns, I pulled into a brightly lit gas station, trying to calm my racing heart. The digital clock read 3:47 a.m. I scanned the parking lot, half expecting to see a vehicle following me, but there was only a single semi-truck with its driver asleep in the cab. Had I really hit someone back there? Should I call the police? But what would I say? That I was illegally camping, and some people scared me. I had no proof they meant harm, just my terrified interpretation of overheard words. "Get it together, Meredith," I whispered, watching my pale face in the rearview mirror. After filling my tank, I decided to move to a completely different area. Manhattan seemed too crowded and difficult to navigate in my van, but I remembered reading about a quiet spot near Prospect Park in Brooklyn where other vanlifers sometimes stayed. The neighborhood streets there had fewer restrictions on overnight parking, at least according to the forums. I needed to be around other people, other cars, somewhere those people couldn't easily find me. Dawn was breaking as I found a spot on a tree-lined street near the park. Several other vehicles looked like they might be lived in. A weathered RV, a van with curtained windows. The neighborhood was stirring to life, with early morning joggers and dog walkers already out. The normalcy was comforting. I collapsed into my bed, exhausted but too wired to sleep. Every passing car, every voice on the sidewalk jolted me awake. I kept seeing those dark figures, hearing that chilling assessment. Nobody looking for them here. Around noon, after a few hours of fitful sleep, I ventured out to explore the neighborhood and clear my head. The October air was crisp, and fallen leaves crunched beneath my feet as I walked through Prospect Park. I found a coffee shop with free Wi-Fi and settled in with my laptop, searching local news for any reports of an incident in Queens. Nothing. Either I hadn't hurt the person badly, or, more likely, they weren't the type to seek medical attention that would require a police report. As I scrolled through my phone, a notification popped up from one of the Vanlife forums I frequented. Someone had posted a warning about targeting of solo travelers in New York City. The post described methodical thieves who specifically sought out vehicles with out-of-state plates in industrial areas. My coffee turned bitter in my mouth as I read details that matched my experience exactly. The post was from 3 days ago. If only I'd checked before choosing my parking spot. I returned to my van as evening approached, feeling marginally safer in this more populated area. As I rounded the corner to my street, I stopped dead. A dark sedan was parked directly behind my van, and a man was peering into my windows, cupping his hands against the glass to see through my blackout curtains. I ducked behind a tree, heart pounding. Was it the same people? How had they found me so quickly? The man straightened and spoke into a phone. I couldn't make out his words, but his body language was alert, purposeful. He walked around my van once more before returning to his car. Instead of driving away, he simply reclined his seat slightly, clearly settling into wait. I retreated silently, ducking into the coffee shop again. I couldn't return to my van, not with him watching it. I had nearly everything valuable with me in my backpack, but the van itself contained my whole life. As night fell, I found myself in a small 24-hour diner, nursing endless cups of coffee, watching the street through the window. The sedan remained, though the driver had changed. Now a woman sat behind the wheel. They were taking shifts. The realization made my skin crawl. These weren't opportunistic thieves. This was organized, patient. What did they want? My van wasn't particularly valuable. Neither was anything inside it. Unless it wasn't my possessions they were after at all. I weighed my options as midnight approached. I could call the police, but what would I say? That someone was parked legally on a public street? I could abandon the van entirely. I had my ID, phone, laptop, and about $800 cash. But the thought of surrendering my home, my independence, made anger flare alongside my fear. I needed a plan, and I needed help. With trembling fingers, I opened the Vanlife forum again and sent a private message to the person who'd posted the warning, describing my situation. The response came quickly. Get out now. Not just your van. The city. They've marked you. The message sender, username NYCNomad, agreed to meet me at an all-night diner in the Bronx. I took the subway, constantly looking over my shoulder, convinced I was being followed. Every person who held my gaze too long, every footstep that matched my pace sent adrenaline surging through my system. By the time I slipped into the cracked vinyl booth across from a weathered man in his 50s, I was nearly hyperventilating. "You must be Meredith," he said, introducing himself as Daryl. His face was deeply lined, with alert eyes that continuously scanned the diner. "You're lucky you got away from them the first time. Most don't." He explained that he'd been living on the road for over a decade and had encountered similar situations in different cities. But the New York operation was the most sophisticated he'd seen. They work industrial areas, parking lots, even Walmart locations upstate. They look for solo travelers, preferably women, with out-of-state plates. "But why?" I asked, wrapping my cold fingers around a mug of burnt coffee. "My van isn't worth that much, and I don't carry valuables." Daryl's eyes met mine, and the gravity in them made my stomach drop. "They're not after your van or your stuff, Meredith. They're human traffickers. The vehicles are just convenient transport containers. Once they take them, with you inside, you disappear into a network that moves between cities. By the time anyone reports you missing, if anyone does, you're long gone." The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright, the diner too noisy. The coffee churned in my stomach as Daryl continued. He'd lost a friend this way 2 years ago, another solo traveler who'd parked in the wrong place. The police had found her van stripped and abandoned in New Jersey, but no trace of her. "How did they find me again?" I asked, thinking of the sedan behind my van. "They tagged the vehicles," Daryl explained. "Tiny GPS trackers, magnetic, usually underneath or in the wheel well. Once they've selected a target, they can track it until they find the right moment." My mind raced back to the tapping I'd heard. Methodical, testing. They weren't admiring my van. They were placing a tracker. Daryl insisted on escorting me back to Brooklyn, but not directly to my van. Instead, we took the subway to a stop several blocks away. "We need to verify the tracker before you go anywhere near that van again," he said. He had a small device that could detect certain radio frequencies, something he'd acquired after his friend's disappearance. We approached my street cautiously. The sedan was still there, but now empty. Where were they? Daryl's hand suddenly gripped my arm, pulling me into the shadow of a building. "Don't move," he whispered. Across the street, I saw them. The woman from the sedan and a man I recognized from the warehouse district. They were talking to a third person, someone in a maintenance uniform who was gesturing toward the surrounding buildings. "They're expanding their search," Daryl muttered. "They think you're hiding nearby." For 20 agonizing minutes, we watched as they systematically checked building entrances and spoke to a few night workers in the area. The woman held something that looked like a tablet, occasionally consulting it. "Probably monitoring the tracker," Daryl said. "They know the van hasn't moved." Eventually, the maintenance worker left, and the other two returned to the sedan. They didn't get in, though. The woman opened the trunk and removed what looked like a duffel bag. "We need to move now," Daryl urged, pulling me back toward the subway entrance. "They're preparing to take your van tonight." Panic surged through me. Everything I owned was in that vehicle. I can't just leave it. I protested. Daryl's grip tightened. "Listen to me carefully. They've likely watched you enough to know you're not inside. That means they're going to disable it, search it thoroughly, and then either wait or take it to draw you out. Either way, if you go back there, you're walking into a trap." As if to confirm his words, we watched the man crouch by my van's front tire. Even from our distance, the metallic flash of a tool was visible in the streetlight. "They're disabling your brakes," Daryl explained grimly. "If you somehow manage to get to your van and drive away, you'd crash within blocks. Then they'd simply pick you up as a good Samaritan helping an accident victim." The calculated cruelty of their methods made me feel physically ill. These weren't opportunistic predators. This was a sophisticated operation that had claimed countless victims before me. "What do we do?" I whispered, watching as everything I owned was being compromised before my eyes. Daryl pulled me away from our vantage point. "First, we get somewhere safe for the night. I know people who can help. Tomorrow, we involve the police, but carefully. Not all of them can be trusted." His words sent a new chill through me. How deep did this network go? As we retreated into the night, I cast one last look at my van, my home, my freedom, now transformed into a trap set specifically for me. Dawn found us in a cramped apartment in Harlem belonging to a friend of Daryl's, a former van dweller named Sophia who'd settled in the city after similar encounters. Her tiny living room was covered with maps and printouts of missing persons reports. "I track cases," she explained, noting my wide-eyed stare. "Looking for patterns. Trying to build something solid enough for law enforcement to take seriously." The wall told a grim story. Dozens of solo travelers who disappeared along the eastern seaboard, many last seen in their vehicles. Sophia had contacts in the NYPD, specifically a detective named Ramirez who believed her theories about organized targeting of nomadic individuals. "People living off-grid are perfect targets," she explained as she made coffee in her cluttered kitchen. "Limited digital footprints, often estranged from family. No consistent community to notice when they go missing. By the time anyone realizes something's wrong, the trail is cold." She was arranging for us to meet with Ramirez that afternoon, away from the precinct. I tried to rest on Sophia's lumpy sofa, but couldn't stop thinking about my van. Everything I owned was in there: clothes, equipment, the journal where I documented my entire journey. More critically, my identification documents were hidden in a compartment I'd built into the floor. Without those, I was vulnerable in entirely different ways. "We need to retrieve your documents at least," Daryl agreed when I voiced my concerns. "But we can't approach your van directly. They're watching it." Detective Ramirez met us in a busy cafe near Columbia University, his plainclothes status obvious only from the alert way he scanned the room before joining our table. He was younger than I expected, with tired eyes and a methodical manner of speaking. He listened intently as I described everything that had happened, occasionally jotting notes in a small notebook. "We've been tracking this group for months," he confirmed. "But they're extremely careful. They scout locations, select targets, and execute with precision. We've found several vehicles stripped and abandoned, but the owners simply vanish." "How many?" I asked, dreading the answer. Ramirez hesitated. That we can directly link to this operation? At least 15 in the past year. But those are just the cases where we found the vehicles. There are likely more where the vehicles disappeared too. The number horrified me. 15 lives erased, families left wondering, all while these predators continued operating with apparent impunity. Why can't you stop them? I demanded, my fear turning to anger. Evidence, Ramirez said simply. They're careful not to leave any. And jurisdiction issues complicate matters. Victims are taken across state lines. Vehicles found in different counties than where the abductions occurred. Different departments don't always connect the dots. He leaned forward, voice lowering. You're the first potential victim who's gotten away and can identify them. You could help us break this open, but it puts you at significant risk. What Ramirez proposed was terrifying. I would approach my van as bait, with undercover officers positioned nearby. They'd intercept the traffickers when they made their move. Absolutely not, Daryl interjected before I could respond. These people have resources we don't understand yet. What if they have someone inside the department? What if the operation goes wrong? His protective anger was touching, but a cold clarity was settling over me. If I ran, these people would simply find another target, someone who might not be as lucky as I had been. I'll do it, I said finally. But I need guarantees, and I want my van back intact when this is over. Ramirez nodded solemnly. We'll take every precaution. But first, we need to establish if your van is still under surveillance and confirm the presence of the tracker. He provided a burner phone and strict instructions. I was to stay with Sophia, make no contact with anyone from my previous life, and wait for his signal. The operation would take place that night. As darkness fell over the city, I found myself in an unmarked police van 2 blocks from where my vehicle was parked. I was wired with a small microphone under my shirt and had been briefed extensively on what to do and say. Officers were positioned throughout the area, dressed as homeless individuals, late-night dog walkers, and delivery drivers. Ramirez's final words before I left the van echoed in my mind. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, use the panic word and get down immediately. The walk to my van was the longest of my life. Each step felt like moving through molasses, my senses hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow. The street appeared normal, residential, quiet for New York, with only a few pedestrians. My van sat exactly where I'd left it, looking deceptively undisturbed. There was no sign of the sedan that had been watching it. Had they given up? Moved on to easier prey? Somehow, that seemed unlikely. As I approached the driver's side door, keys in hand, the back of my neck prickled with the unmistakable sensation of being watched. I unlocked my van with trembling hands, sliding into the driver's seat as naturally as possible. Everything looked untouched, but I knew better. Following Ramirez's instructions, I went through the motions of someone returning after a day out, setting down my bag, checking my phone, appearing to prepare for the night. The small device Ramirez had given me was tucked into my pocket, scanning for the GPS tracker. A soft vibration confirmed what we already suspected. There was indeed a foreign device attached to my vehicle. Through my window, I noticed a man walking a dog, moving slowly past my van for the second time. One of Ramirez's officers, maintaining the perimeter. I felt marginally safer knowing they were out there, but the knot in my stomach wouldn't dissolve. According to the plan, I was to remain in the van for 30 minutes, making normal preparations for evening, before attempting to drive away. The theory was that this would trigger the traffickers to make their move, allowing the police to intercept them. 20 minutes passed with excruciating slowness. I busied myself organizing maps, pretending to plan the next day's route. Occasionally, I glanced at the mirrors, looking for any sign of the dark sedan or its occupants. Nothing seemed amiss, which somehow felt more unsettling than if I'd spotted them directly. Were they watching from one of the surrounding buildings? Had they somehow detected the police presence and aborted their plan? Just as I was beginning to hope they'd moved on, my burner phone buzzed with a text from Ramirez. Subject vehicle approaching from east. Dark van, 2 occupants. Stay calm. My mouth went dry as I glanced in the side mirror. A dark panel van had indeed turned onto my street, moving slowly with its lights dimmed. It passed my position once, then circled around to park about 50 feet behind me. Through the mirror, I could see 2 figures sitting motionless in the front seats. Following the plan, I started my engine, signaling my intention to leave. The moment I did, The panel van's doors opened, and 3 people emerged, not 2 as Ramirez had indicated. The third must have been hiding in the back. They moved with purpose, spreading out to approach my vehicle from different angles. Where were the police? Why weren't they moving in? I reached for the panic button clipped to my belt, but before I could press it, my driver's side window exploded inward. A gloved hand reached through the shattered glass, unlocking my door and yanking it open with brutal force. I screamed the panic word, Redwood, as I was dragged from the seat. Where was Ramirez? Where were the officers who were supposed to be watching? The woman from the warehouse district smiled coldly as she pressed something against my neck. Should have kept driving when you had the chance, she whispered as a sharp pain bloomed at the injection site. My vision began to blur almost immediately, but not before I glimpsed something that turned my blood to ice. 2 of the supposed homeless people, who were actually police officers, were being shoved into the back of the panel van by men I hadn't seen before. This wasn't an interception, it was an ambush. They had known about the operation. As darkness crowded the edges of my consciousness, I heard sirens in the distance. Too far away, too late. I awoke to the sensation of movement, the rhythmic sway and rumble of a vehicle in motion. My head pounded, and my thoughts came sluggishly through the lingering effects of whatever drug they'd administered. I was lying on a hard metal floor, hands zip-tied behind my back. Through blurry vision, I could make out other shapes, other people, similarly restrained. One of them was Daryl. They'd taken him too. How had they known about him? About the police operation? She's awake, a voice noted dispassionately. A face swam into my field of vision, the woman from before. Don't bother screaming. We're on the interstate now, and this compartment is soundproofed. She wasn't even bothering to hide her face, which meant only one thing. She didn't expect any of us to be in a position to identify her later. What do you want from us? I managed to croak, my throat painfully dry. You specifically? Nothing, she replied, checking something on her tablet. You were just in the right place at the right time. Or wrong, depending on your perspective. She nodded toward Daryl's unconscious form. Him, we've been watching for a while. Getting too close to things, asking too many questions. The detective too, though he's traveling separately. The casual way she referenced Ramirez confirmed my worst fears. Their operation went deeper than any of us had suspected. You won't get away with this, I said, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. The woman actually laughed. We already have. Multiple times. Why do you think no one connects the dots? We have people everywhere, police departments, truck stops, even border patrol. She checked her watch. We'll be crossing state lines in about 20 minutes. After that, the jurisdiction issues alone will ensure no cohesive investigation. I tested my restraints discreetly while keeping her talking. Where are you taking us? The zip ties were tight, cutting into my wrists, but I could feel a slight give in the left one. The woman stood, apparently done with the conversation. You'll find out when we get there. For now, I suggest you rest. It's a long drive to the processing facility. Processing facility. The clinical detachment of the term made my skin crawl. As she moved toward the front of the vehicle, separated from our compartment by what looked like a reinforced partition, I redoubled my efforts to free my hands. The van hit a pothole, jostling everyone. I bit back a cry as my shoulders slammed into the metal wall, but I felt the zip tie give slightly more. Beside me, Daryl was beginning to stir, his eyes flickering open. I shifted closer to him. Daryl, I whispered urgently. Can you move? His eyes focused on me, confusion giving way to grim understanding as he took in our surroundings. Meredith, he murmured. I'm sorry. This is my fault. I shook my head. No time for that. Listen, I think I can get my hands free. When I do, be ready. The van was moving at highway speed, which limited our options, but I'd noticed an emergency latch on the back doors, standard for cargo vans. If we could open those doors, create enough commotion. With a painful tearing sensation, I finally worked my left hand free of the restraint, biting my lip to keep from crying out as the plastic cut deep into my wrist. Blood made my fingers slippery as I reached to untie Daryl. There are at least 4 others here, he whispered, nodding toward the still forms around us. We can't leave them. I glanced toward the partition separating us from our captors. There was a small window through which they could observe the cargo area, but currently, no one was watching. We won't, I promised, though I had no idea how we could save everyone. One by one, I moved between the unconscious figures, freeing hands and checking pulses. 2 were the police officers I'd seen captured. The others I didn't recognize, possibly earlier victims who hadn't yet been processed, whatever that entailed. As I reached the last person, a young woman with a gash across her forehead, the van began to slow. "They're taking an exit," Daryl whispered urgently. "It's now or never." We had seconds to make a decision that would determine whether we lived or died. The young woman stirred under my touch, her eyes flying open in panic. "Help me," she gasped. "Please." In that moment, I knew we couldn't leave anyone behind, regardless of the risk. "Everyone listen," I whispered as the van continued to decelerate. "When I open the back doors, run. Scatter in different directions. They can't chase all of us." The van turned sharply, throwing us against the walls, then began to slow dramatically. Were we arriving somewhere? I crawled to the emergency latch, positioning myself to pull it the moment we stopped completely. Daryl helped the others to sitting positions, murmuring instructions. The young woman clutched my arm. "They killed my boyfriend," she said, her voice barely audible. "Shot him when he tried to fight back." The van came to a complete stop. Through the small partition window, I could see we were at what appeared to be a checkpoint of some kind. A guardhouse with a gate across a rural road. One of our captors was speaking to someone outside the vehicle. This was our moment. I met Daryl's eyes across the dim space, receiving his nod of confirmation. With every ounce of strength I possessed, I yanked the emergency latch downward and pushed against the doors. The rush of cold night air was accompanied by shouts of alarm from the front of the van. "Run!" I screamed, helping the still groggy victims stumble out into the darkness. We scattered like startled deer, sprinting toward the surrounding woods. Behind us, I heard the woman's voice issuing sharp commands, followed by the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. A shot rang out, the sound echoing across the open space. Someone ahead of me cried out and fell. I veered sharply, zigzagging between trees as bullets splintered bark around me. The young woman was at my side, her breath coming in terrified gasps. Together we plunged deeper into the forest, driven by pure survival instinct. Behind us, flashlight beams swept through the trees as our pursuers organized a search. I had no idea where we were, where the nearest help might be, or even if any of the others had escaped. All I knew was that we had to keep moving. "I think I recognize this area," the young woman gasped as we paused behind a fallen log. "They brought us through here before. There's a highway about 2 miles east." Hope flared briefly until another gunshot echoed through the trees, followed by a scream that was abruptly cut short. They were hunting us methodically, and they knew these woods far better than we did. The realization that I might not survive the night settled over me with terrible clarity. As dawn broke over the tree line, casting long shadows through the forest, we heard the wail of distant sirens. Had someone escaped? Called for help? The young woman, who had told me her name was Valerie during our desperate flight, grabbed my arm. "We need to move toward the sound," she insisted. "It's our only chance." But movement meant exposure, and the searchers were still out there. I could hear them calling to each other, voices drawing closer. We had almost reached what appeared to be a service road when a figure stepped into our path, the woman from the van, now holding a pistol pointed directly at my chest. "Impressive stamina," she remarked conversationally, as though commenting on a sporting event. "But this little adventure ends now." Behind her, 2 men emerged from the trees, each carrying rifles. There was nowhere to run. Valerie trembled beside me, her brief hope extinguished. The woman raised her radio, presumably to call in our recapture, when the crack of a gunshot split the morning air. For a suspended moment, the woman looked merely surprised, her free hand rising to touch the spreading red stain on her chest. Then she crumpled to the ground. The men with rifles whirled, firing blindly into the trees behind them, only to be cut down by precise shots from multiple directions. As they fell, figures in tactical gear emerged from cover. FBI, not local police. Detective Ramirez appeared beside me, his face bruised but his eyes fierce with triumph. "We got them, Meredith. The whole operation. Their inside contacts at the checkpoint recognized me when they brought me through and called it in." His voice softened as he took in my battered condition. "I'm sorry it came to this. We had no idea how extensive their network was. As federal agents swarmed the area, securing the scene and attending to the survivors being brought out of the woods, I realized how close we had all come to disappearing forever. Days later, as I prepared to leave New York, this time with a police escort until I crossed state lines, Ramirez shared the full scope of what they'd uncovered. The trafficking ring had been operating along the eastern seaboard for nearly a decade, specifically targeting nomadic individuals who were less likely to be immediately missed. My van, now returned to me with all tracking devices removed, represented a rare victory in a war most people didn't even know was being fought. "Will you keep traveling?" Ramirez asked as we stood beside my freshly repaired vehicle. I ran my hand along its side, remembering the terror of that first night, the tapping fingers placing the tracker. So much had changed since then. Daryl and 3 others had survived the forest pursuit. Valerie was reuniting with her family after being missing for 2 weeks. But others hadn't made it. Casualties of an operation that had gone badly wrong before it went right. "Yes," I said finally, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. But differently, more carefully. I thought of the wall in Sophia's apartment. All those missing faces, many of whom would never be found despite the ring being broken. And I'm going to help others do the same. As I drove away from New York, the city's skyline receding in my rearview mirror, I knew that the horror of those 5 days would never completely leave me. But neither would the determination that had been forged in its crucible. The open road still called, and now I had a purpose beyond my own freedom, ensuring that others could pursue theirs safely. Dust swirled around my van's tires as I pulled into the cracked, weed-choked lot of an abandoned gas station just off Route 81 in Syracuse, New York. I'm a Lowen Carver, 29 years old, and I hail from Rochester, about an hour's drive west. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky a bruised purple, and I needed a place to crash for the night. This old station, its faded sign barely reading Gus's fuel stop, looked quiet enough. My van, a beat-up Ford Transit I'd converted into a cozy home, hummed as I cut the engine. The silence hit hard, like the world holding its breath. I'd been living this van life gig for 2 years, chasing freedom, but spots like this always gave me a shiver. Something about the rusted pumps and shattered windows felt wrong. I hopped out, my boots crunching on broken glass. The air smelled of old oil and something sour, maybe rotting leaves. I'd parked near the edge of the lot, close to a sagging chain-link fence that separated the station from a dark stretch of woods. My buddy Theo, a scruffy 32-year-old from Buffalo I'd met at a Vanlife meetup, was supposed to roll in soon. He was a mechanic, always tinkering, always late. I texted him, "Yo, where you at? This place is creepy as hell." No reply. Typical Theo. I figured I'd set up for the night, cook some ramen, maybe crack a beer. The station's busted canopy loomed overhead, casting jagged shadows. Inside the van, I flicked on my fairy lights, trying to shake the uneasy vibe. My setup was simple: a mattress, a tiny stove, and shelves crammed with books and gear. I'd painted the walls sage green to feel less like I was living in a tin can. But as I boiled water, the quiet outside felt heavy, like it was pressing against the windows. I glanced out and saw nothing but the empty lot and those woods, black as ink. I laughed to myself, trying to shrug off the nerves. "Aloan, you're being paranoid," I muttered. I'd camped in sketchy spots before, old quarries, desert pull-offs. This was just another stop. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching. The gas station's old store, its windows boarded up, looked like it was staring back. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside to check the perimeter, a habit from too many horror movies. The beam caught a faded "no trespassing" sign, half buried in weeds. Great. I wasn't supposed to be here, but van life meant bending rules sometimes. I scanned the lot, the light bouncing off rusted pumps. Nothing moved. Just me, the van, and the creepy-ass station. Back inside, I locked the doors and tried to focus on my ramen. Theo still hadn't texted, and my phone had 1 bar. Syracuse wasn't exactly remote, but this spot felt cut off, like it existed in its own little pocket of nowhere. I sipped my beer, the cold fizz calming my nerves. I thought about Theo's stories, how he'd once camped near an old asylum and swore he heard whispers. I rolled my eyes at the memory. "Dude's full of it," I said aloud, but my voice sounded small in the van's tight space. The night deepened, and the temperature dropped. I zipped up my hoodie and checked the windows again. The woods beyond the fence seemed to swallow the light. I'd picked this spot because it was free and off the radar, but now it felt like a mistake. I thought about driving to a Walmart lot instead, safer, brighter, but I was too tired. Plus, Theo was coming. I trusted him. He was solid, always had my back. Still, I kept my pocket knife close, just in case. You never know, right? I tried to distract myself with a book, some worn sci-fi novel I'd snagged at a thrift store. But every page turned felt loud, like it was echoing outside. I kept glancing at the windows, expecting what? A face? A shadow? I laughed it off again, but my heart wasn't in it. The gas station, with its broken pumps and peeling paint, felt like it was waiting for something. Or someone. I checked my phone again. Still no Theo. Come on, man, I whispered, frustration creeping in. The van's walls felt thinner than usual, like they couldn't keep the world out. I turned off the fairy lights to save battery, plunging the van into near darkness. The only light came from my phone's glow. I typed another text to Theo. Seriously, dude, this place is giving me the creeps. I hit send, but the message hung, unsent. No signal now. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the fence. It sounded like something scraping, slow and deliberate. I set the phone down and leaned back, trying to breathe. This was just another night, I told myself. Just another stop on the road. But as I closed my eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The gas station, Syracuse, those woods, they all felt alive, like they were closing in. I didn't know it yet, but that disturbing vibe was just the start. Something was coming, and I wasn't ready. The wind scraping against the fence grew sharper, like nails on a chalkboard, and I couldn't sit still anymore. I flicked my flashlight back on, its beam cutting through the van's dark interior. My name's Aloan Carver, still 29, still from Rochester, and right now, I was regretting every choice that led me to this creepy-ass gas station in Syracuse. Theo still hadn't shown, and my phone was a useless brick. No signal, no bars, just a mocking searching on the screen. I muttered a curse and tossed it onto the mattress. I needed to decide, stay put and wait for Theo or bail to a safer spot. The thought of driving in the dark didn't thrill me, but this place was starting to feel like a horror movie set. I stepped outside, the cold biting my face, and scanned the lot again. The gas station's boarded-up store looked even more ominous under the moon's pale glow. I noticed something I hadn't before, a faint light flickering behind one of the boards, like a candle or something. My stomach dropped. Nobody should be here. This place was supposed to be abandoned. I whispered, "What the hell?" and aimed my flashlight at the window. The light vanished, leaving just darkness. Maybe I'd imagined it. My brain was probably playing tricks, like when you see faces in tree bark after too many ghost stories. Back in the van, I tried the radio for some noise to drown out the eerie quiet. Static. Every station, just hissing static. I smacked the dashboard like that'd fix it, but no dice. Great. I groaned, slumping back. I thought about Theo again. He was never this late without a heads up. Last time we camped, near Lake Ontario, he'd rolled in at midnight with a busted tire and a grin, cracking jokes about surviving the apocalypse. But this felt different. My gut was screaming something was off, and I couldn't ignore that disturbing churn anymore. I grabbed my pocket knife, flipping it open and closed, a nervous tick. I decided to give Theo until midnight, about an hour, before I'd pack up and head to a Walmart lot closer to downtown Syracuse. I didn't want to leave him hanging, but this place was giving me the creeps. I started organizing my gear to kill time, stuffing clothes into a duffel. That's when I heard it, a low, rhythmic thump, like someone tapping a stick against metal. It was coming from the gas pumps. My heart kicked up a notch. I froze, listening. Thump, thump, thump. Slow, deliberate, not random. I crept to the window, peering out. The lot was empty, just my van and those rusted pumps glinting faintly. The thumping stopped, and I held my breath, waiting. Nothing. Maybe it was just the wind knocking something loose. I'd seen that before, old signs banging around in a storm. But this didn't feel like that. It felt intentional. I shook my head, trying to laugh it off. "Aloan, you're losing it," I muttered, but my voice cracked. I double-checked the van's locks, my fingers fumbling. The idea of someone out there, in the dark, made my skin crawl. I decided to text Theo one more time, even with no signal. "Dude, if you're pranking me, I'm gonna kill you." The message didn't send, but typing it made me feel less alone. I thought about calling out into the lot, but that seemed like a dumb move, like yelling "Who's there?" in a slasher flick. Instead, I grabbed my flashlight and a crowbar from under the seat. If something was out there, I wasn't going down without a fight. I'd learned that from years on the road. Always have a backup plan, even if it's just a heavy piece of metal. Stepping outside again, I moved slowly, my boots quiet on the cracked pavement. The thumping had stopped, but now the air felt thicker, like it was pressing down on me. I shone the flashlight toward the pumps, half expecting to see some raccoon or stray dog. Nothing, just shadows and rust. But then, behind the pumps, I caught a glimpse of something. Movement, quick and low, darting toward the woods. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Just a deer," I whispered, but I didn't believe it. Deer don't move like that, all jerky and wrong. I backed toward the van, my crowbar gripped tight. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, like eyes were boring into me from the dark. I thought about this one time in Rochester, when I'd parked near a sketchy alley and felt the same prickle on my neck. Turned out to be a drunk guy rummaging through trash, harmless. But this felt scarier, more disturbing. I climbed back into the van, locking the doors, my breath shaky. I needed Theo to show up, like yesterday. As I sat there, clutching the crowbar, I noticed something new. A faint smell, like copper and decay, seeping into the van. It wasn't there before. I checked my stove, my trash, nothing. The smell was coming from outside, creeping through the vents. My stomach twisted, and I slammed the vents shut. Whatever was out there, it wasn't just some animal. Something was wrong, and it was getting closer. I just didn't know how close yet. The coppery stench in the van was choking now, like blood mixed with something rotten, and I couldn't sit still. I'm a Lowen Carver, 29, from Rochester, and I was parked at this godforsaken gas station in Syracuse, gripping my crowbar like it was my lifeline. The thumping from the pumps was gone, but that fleeting movement I'd seen near the woods had my nerves screaming. I kept my flashlight off, not wanting to draw attention, but my eyes were glued to the windows. The moon barely lit the lot, and every shadow looked like it was moving. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I whispered, "Theo, where the fuck are you?" knowing he couldn't hear me. This place was turning into a nightmare. I leaned forward, peering through the windshield, when a sharp crack split the silence, like wood snapping. It came from the direction of the boarded-up store. My whole body froze, the crowbar slick in my sweaty hands. I told myself it was just the old building settling, like when my Rochester apartment creaked in the wind. But then it came again, crack, 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 slow, like someone breaking boards one by one. My mouth went dry. Nobody should be here. This station had been dead for years, its windows sealed tight. I thought about that flickering light I'd seen earlier. Not my imagination. Something was in there. I ducked low, my breath shallow, and peeked over the dashboard. The store's boarded windows were dark, but now I saw it. A silhouette, tall and lanky, slipping out from behind the building. It moved wrong, too fast, like it wasn't quite human. My stomach lurched, a wave of horror washing over me. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks, but it was still there, crouching near the pumps. It wasn't Theo. Theo's broad, all shoulders and beer gut. This thing was thin, jerky, like a marionette with half its strings cut. I bit my lip to keep from gasping. I fumbled for my phone, praying for a signal, but it was still dead. The silhouette shifted, its head tilting like it was listening. I held my breath, my heart hammering so loud I was sure it could hear me. I thought about this one time in Rochester when I'd seen a coyote in my headlights. Its eyes glowed, predatory but natural. This wasn't that. This felt wrong, disturbing, like something that didn't belong in the world. The figure stood, slow and deliberate, and started moving toward my van. Each step was uneven, like it was limping or dragging something. I slid down to the floor, clutching the crowbar, my mind racing. Should I start the van and peel out? The engine would roar, giving me away. Stay quiet and hope it passes? My van wasn't exactly stealth. Sage green walls don't hide you from whatever the hell that was. The figure stopped, maybe 20 feet away, and I heard a new sound, a low, guttural hum, like someone trying to sing through a throat full of gravel. It sent a shiver down my spine, pure terror spiking through me. I peeked up. It was closer now, holding something, maybe a stick or a blade, gleaming faintly in the moonlight. I thought about screaming, but who would hear? The woods were empty, the road dead. I remembered Theo's dumb story about that asylum, how he'd laughed it off. I wished he was here now, cracking a joke, fixing this with his wrench. But it was just me and this thing. It shuffled closer, and I saw its face, or lack of one. No features, just a smooth, pale oval where a face should be. My breath caught, a scream trapped in my chest. This wasn't some drifter or prank. This was something scary, something I couldn't explain. I scrambled to the driver's seat, my hands shaking so bad I dropped the crowbar. It clanged against the floor, loud as a gunshot. The humming stopped. Silence, thick and suffocating, pressed in. I froze, listening. Then, a scrape, metal on metal, right outside my van. It was at the door. My heart was a jackhammer, my vision blurring with panic. I grabbed the keys, fumbling, ready to start the engine, when I heard a second sound. Footsteps, heavy and fast, coming from the woods. Not one person. Two, maybe more. The horror of it hit me like a truck. There was a group out there. I ducked again, praying the van's locks would hold. The scraping at the door grew louder, more insistent, like it was testing the handle. I bit my fist to keep quiet, tears stinging my eyes. I thought about my mom back in Rochester, how she'd begged me to quit van life, said it wasn't safe. I'd laughed, called her paranoid. Now I wished I'd listened. The footsteps from the woods got closer, crunching on gravel. Voices now low, guttural, not words, just sounds. They weren't talking to each other. They were signaling. The van rocked slightly, like something leaned against it. I stifled a whimper, my mind screaming to do something, anything. I clutched the keys, my thumb hovering over the ignition. But if I started the van, they'd know I was here for sure. If I stayed, they'd get in. The faceless thing, the others in the woods, it wasn't just one threat anymore. Something was clearly, horribly wrong, and I was trapped in the middle of it, my little van no match for whatever was circling me in the dark. The van rocked again, harder this time, and I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I'm Aloan Carver, 29, from Rochester, and I was trapped in my van at this cursed gas station in Syracuse, surrounded by God knows what. The faceless figure was scraping at the door, and those footsteps from the woods were closing in, their guttural signals slicing through the night. My hands shook as I jammed the key into the ignition. Screw stealth. I had to get out. The engine roared to life, loud as a gunshot, and the scraping stopped. For a split second, I thought maybe I'd scared them off. Then something slammed against the side of the van, so hard the whole thing shuddered. I screamed, flooring the gas. Tires screeched as I peeled out of the lot, the van fishtailing on the cracked pavement. My headlights caught glimpses of them, 3 figures now, lanky and wrong, darting across the lot like spiders. One was the faceless thing, its pale head glinting as it lunged toward me. The others were hooded, their faces hidden, but they moved fast, too fast, cutting through the weeds toward the road. My heart was in my throat, pure terror driving me as I swerved onto Route 81. I glanced in the side mirror and saw them running, not stopping, chasing my van like it was prey. Who the hell were these people? The road was dark, no streetlights, just my headlights slicing through the black. I pushed the van to 70, then 80, the engine groaning. I thought about this one time in Rochester when I'd outrun a cop after speeding. Dumb, but it felt like practice for this. My phone was still dead, no way to call for help. The gas gauge was low. Shit, I hadn't filled up since yesterday. Panic clawed at me. What if I ran out of gas? What if they caught up? I kept checking the mirrors, expecting those figures to appear, but the road behind stayed empty. Too empty. It felt wrong, like they knew something I didn't. I spotted a turnoff ahead, a narrow dirt road leading into more woods. Bad idea, but staying on the open highway felt worse, like I was a sitting duck. I yanked the wheel, the van bouncing as it hit the dirt. Branches scraped the sides, loud and jarring, like the woods were trying to grab me. I slowed down, my hands white-knuckling the steering wheel. The dirt road twisted, and I had no idea where it led. All I knew was I needed distance from that gas station, from those things. The horror of their faceless leader, that smooth, blank head, burned in my mind. I couldn't unsee it. A mile down the road, the van sputtered. My heart sank. The gas light was on, blinking like a warning. No, 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 I muttered, smacking the dashboard. I coasted to a stop, the engine coughing. Silence crashed in, broken only by my ragged breathing. I locked the doors, grabbed the crowbar, and scanned the woods. Nothing but trees and shadows. I tried to think, what would Theo do? He'd probably hotwire something or fight. But Theo wasn't here, and I was alone, stranded, with those freaks probably still out there. The thought sent a shiver of dread through me. I fumbled for my flashlight, clicking it on low to save battery. The beam shook as I aimed it out the window. The woods were thick, branches tangling like a cage. Then I heard it, a crunch, like a boot on gravel, not far off. My breath hitched. I turned off the flashlight, plunging the van into darkness. Another crunch, closer. They'd followed me. How? I hadn't seen them on the road, but here they were, hunting me. I gripped the crowbar, my mind racing. Hide in the van. Run into the woods? Both felt like death sentences, but I had to move. I slipped out the passenger side, keeping low, the crowbar heavy in my hand. The air was cold, that coppery stench back, stronger now. I crept into the trees, my boots sinking into damp earth. Every step felt like a betrayal, too loud, too clumsy. I remembered hiking in Letchworth State Park once, feeling invincible. Now, every twig snap was a stab of fear. Behind me, I heard the van's door creak open. They were inside it. My home, my safe space, violated. I bit back a sob and kept moving, deeper into the woods, praying I could lose them. The trees closed in, branches clawing at my face. I heard them behind me, footsteps, fast and uneven, and that guttural hum again, like a signal. They weren't giving up. I stumbled over a root, catching myself on a tree, my hands scraping rough bark. My flashlight was useless now, dropped somewhere back by the van. I was blind, running on adrenaline and terror. The woods felt alive, like they were part of the hunt. I kept going, my lungs burning, knowing if I stopped, they'd catch me. And I didn't want to know what they'd do. A light flickered ahead, a faint glow, like a fire. Hope surged, then died. It wasn't help. It was them, waiting. I froze, crouched behind a tree, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. The glow grew, and I saw them. For now, their shapes distorted by the firelight. The faceless one stood in the center, holding something dripping, red and raw. My stomach churned, the horror overwhelming. I had to get away, but the woods were a maze, and they were closing in, their hum growing louder, like a chant. I was running out of time. Crouched behind the tree, I could barely breathe, the air thick with that sickening copper smell. I'm a Lowen Carver, 29, from Rochester, and I was deep in the woods outside Syracuse, hunted by these people, if you could call them that. The firelight ahead flickered, casting their twisted shadows across the trees. The faceless one stood tall, its blank head tilting as it held that dripping thing. God, was it flesh? My stomach heaved, but I swallowed the bile. I had to think. Running blindly got me here, but stopping wasn't an option. My crowbar was all I had, and my legs were shaking, ready to give out. I needed a plan, but fear was choking my brain. I crept backward, trying to stay silent, but my foot caught a branch. It snapped, loud as a scream in the quiet. The humming stopped. My heart froze. The figures turned, their heads swiveling like animals sniffing the air. I bolted, no choice now, crashing through the underbrush. Branches tore at my skin, blood trickling down my cheek, but I didn't care. The horror of being caught was worse than any pain. I heard them behind me, their footsteps pounding, that guttural chant starting again, closer, hungrier. I was prey, and they were gaining. I spotted a clearing ahead, the fire's glow fading behind me. Maybe I could lose them there, find a road, flag someone down. My lungs burned, my vision blurring, but I pushed harder. I thought about Theo, wondering if he'd made it to the gas station, if he was out there looking for me, or worse, if they'd gotten him first. The idea hit like a punch, a tragic weight I couldn't shake. I stumbled into the clearing, my boots sinking into mud, and saw it, a rusted pickup truck, half hidden by vines. A chance. If it worked, I could drive out of this nightmare. I sprinted to the truck, yanking the door. It was unlocked, keys dangling in the ignition. A miracle. I slid in, slamming the door, and turned the key. The engine sputtered but caught, coughing to life. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. The passenger window exploded inward, glass spraying my face. A hand, bony, smeared with something dark, reached in. I screamed, swinging the crowbar, hitting flesh with a sickening crack. The hand pulled back, but the faceless one was there, its blank head inches from the window, staring without eyes. Terror locked my joints. I floored the gas, the truck lurching forward, tires spinning in the mud. The other figures appeared, circling the clearing, their hoods hiding their faces. One threw something, a rock, maybe, crashing into the windshield, cracking it. I swerved, the truck bouncing over roots, but the engine started to choke. "Come on," I yelled, smacking the dash. It stalled. Silence. The chant grew louder, closer. I grabbed the crowbar and kicked the door open, ready to run again, but my foot caught on the seatbelt, tangled like a trap. My deadly mistake. They were on me before I could free myself. Hands grabbed my arms, cold and strong, dragging me from the truck. I swung the crowbar, hitting one in the chest, but it didn't flinch. The faceless one loomed over me, its blank head tilting, that dripping thing in its hand now clear, a human heart, still glistening. My scream died as they pinned me down, the ground cold and wet. I thought of Rochester, my mom, Theo, all the nights I'd felt free in my van. Now, it was just horror, raw and final. The chant grew frantic, their hands tearing at my clothes, my skin. I fought, kicking, clawing, but there were too many. The faceless one raised the heart, like an offering, and I saw a knife in its other hand, gleaming in the firelight. I thought of every dumb choice. Parking at that gas station, trusting Theo would show, running into the woods. Each one led here, to this tragedy. The knife came down, and pain exploded, sharp and blinding. My vision faded, the chant swallowing everything. I don't know how long I lasted, but I felt the cold seeping in, my blood mixing with the mud. The last thing I saw was that blank face, leaning close, like it was studying me. No eyes, no mouth, just nothing. I wanted to scream for Theo, for anyone, but my voice was gone. The woods closed in, the fire's glow fading, and I was alone with them, my van life dream twisted into something disturbing, something final. I'd never make it back to Rochester. The tragedy wasn't just mine. Somewhere out there, Theo might be looking, or maybe he was already gone, caught by these things. The gas station, the woods, this truck, they were traps, and I'd walked right into them. My last thought was of my van, my little green home, sitting abandoned. I'd wanted freedom, but all I found was this, cold, cruel, and final. The tires of my van crunched over fallen leaves as I pulled into a forgotten corner of Roscoe Conkling Park in Utica, New York. I'm Gideon Harlow, 34 years old, from Albany, about 2 hours east. The park was a ghost town, its old playground equipment rusted and tangled with vines, like something out of a post-apocalypse flick. It was late, maybe 10 p.m., and the sky was a heavy gray, promising rain. I'd been living in my converted Dodge Sprinter for 3 years, chasing solitude and cheap rent. This spot seemed perfect, off the grid, no cops to hassle me. But as I cut the engine, the quiet felt wrong, like the park was holding its breath. I stepped out, my sneakers sinking into damp grass. The air smelled of wet earth and something sharp, like rust. My van, painted matte black with a mural of stars I'd done myself, blended into the shadows near a crumbling pavilion. I was meeting my friend Maris, a 28-year-old artist from Syracuse who I'd connected with on a Vanlife forum. She was all about sketching creepy places, said it fueled her art. I texted her, "Yo, I'm here. This park's giving horror movie vibes." No reply yet. Maris was flaky, always chasing inspiration, but she'd promised to show tonight. Inside the van, I flicked on my LED lantern, casting a warm glow over my setup. A fold-out bed, a propane stove, and shelves stuffed with camping gear and dog-eared novels. I'd built this rig to feel like home, but tonight, it felt small, like the walls were closing in. The park outside was too dark, the trees swallowing what little moonlight there was. I tried to shake the unease, cracking a window for air. "Just another night, Gideon," I muttered, but my voice sounded thin, like it didn't belong here. I grabbed a protein bar and chewed slowly, scanning the windows. The playground swings creaked in the wind, a lonely, eerie sound. I'd parked here because it was free and quiet, but now I wondered if it was too quiet. Maris had hyped this place, said its abandoned vibe was perfect for sketching. I pictured her out there with her pencils, laughing at shadows. But the longer I sat, the more the park felt off, like it was watching me. I chuckled, trying to lighten my mood. Too many scary stories, man. I stepped outside to stretch, my breath fogging in the chilly air. The pavilion nearby was a wreck, graffiti covered, its roof sagging like it might collapse. I shone my flashlight across the lot, catching glints of broken glass and a faded sign. Park closed after dusk. Shit, I wasn't supposed to be here, but van life meant taking risks. I'd camped in worse spots, an old quarry in Vermont, a desert pull-off in Nevada. This was fine, right? Still, my gut twisted, that disturbing feeling creeping in. Back in the van, I locked the doors and tried to focus on my book, some gritty crime novel. But every page felt like a chore, my eyes darting to the windows. The swings kept creaking, rhythmic, like someone was pushing them. I told myself it was just the wind, like that time in Albany when a storm made my neighbor's gate bang all night. But this felt different, heavier. I checked my phone again. No bars, no Maris. Come on, girl, I muttered, frustration mixing with nerves. The park was starting to feel like a trap. I pulled my hoodie tighter and grabbed my multi-tool, flipping out the knife blade. It wasn't much, but it made me feel less helpless. I thought about Maris's stories. She'd once camped near an old mill and swore she saw a figure in the fog. I'd laughed, called her dramatic. Now, I wasn't so sure. The park's silence was oppressive, broken only by those damn swings. I leaned back, trying to relax, but my heart wasn't buying it. Something was out there, and it wasn't just my imagination. The lantern flickered, just a glitch in the battery, but it made me jump. I turned it off, letting my eyes adjust to the dark. Outside, the trees loomed, their branches like bony fingers against the sky. I thought about driving to a Walmart lot, safer and brighter, but Maris was coming, and I didn't want to ditch her. Plus, I was stubborn, 3 years on the road, and I wasn't going to let a creepy park scare me off. Still, I kept the multi-tool close, my fingers tracing its edges. As I sat there, the creaking swings stopped. Sudden silence, thick and heavy, pressed against the van. I held my breath, listening. Then, a new sound, soft, like a whisper, coming from the pavilion. My skin prickled, a shiver of horror running through me. It wasn't the wind. It was too clear, too human. I leaned toward the window, squinting into the dark, and that's when I saw it. A shadow, moving slow and deliberate, right where I'd parked my van. That shadow by the pavilion froze me in my seat, my heart thumping like a drum. I'm Gideon Harlow, 34, from Albany, and I was parked in this creepy-ass abandoned park in Utica, my van feeling more like a cage than a home. The whisper I'd heard was gone, but the shadow lingered, low and hunched, moving like it was trying not to be seen. My multi-tool was clenched in my fist, its knife blade out, but it felt useless against whatever was out there. Maris still hadn't texted, and my phone was a dead brick. No signal, no bars. I had to decide, stay put and wait for her, or get the hell out of this disturbing park before things got worse. I leaned closer to the window, my breath fogging the glass. The shadow shifted, slipping behind the pavilion's graffiti-covered wall. My gut screamed to start the van and peel out, but Maris was supposed to be here. What if she showed up and I bailed? I pictured her sketching in the dark, oblivious to whatever was creeping around. I muttered, "Come on, Maris, don't make me regret this." I tried the radio for some noise to calm my nerves. Nothing but static, hissing like a snake. I smacked it off, the silence somehow worse. I grabbed my flashlight, keeping the beam off for now. The park was too quiet, like it was holding its breath. I thought about this one time in Albany, when I'd parked near a sketchy lot and heard kids messing around. Annoying, but harmless. This wasn't that. This felt scary, like the air itself was watching me. I decided to give Maris 30 minutes. If she didn't show, I'd head to a gas station or something brighter. I started packing my gear, just in case, stuffing my sleeping bag into its sack, my hands shaky. That's when I heard it, a low, scraping sound, like metal dragging on concrete. My head snapped up. The sound was coming from the playground, near those creaky swings. I squinted through the window, my heart racing. Nothing moved, but the scraping kept going, slow and deliberate, like someone was dragging a pipe or a chain. I whispered, "What the hell is that?" trying to keep my cool. I'd heard raccoons knock over trash cans before, but this was heavier, more intentional. The horror of it hit me. This wasn't an animal. I flicked on the flashlight, keeping the beam low, and aimed it out the window. The swings were still, but something glinted in the grass nearby, like metal catching the light. I killed the flashlight, my pulse hammering. Whatever was out there, I didn't want it knowing I was watching. I thought about starting the van, but the noise would give me away. Stay quiet, stay hidden. That was my best shot. I locked the doors again, double-checking, and slid down in my seat. The scraping stopped, and for a moment, I thought maybe I was safe. Then I heard footsteps, soft, uneven, coming from the pavilion. My skin crawled. They weren't rushing, just walking, like they had all the time in the world. I gripped my multi-tool tighter, my knuckles white. I peeked over the dashboard, barely breathing. The shadow was back, closer now, near the edge of the pavilion. It was human-shaped, but something was off. Too tall, too thin, like it was stretched. I couldn't see a face, just a dark outline against the trees. My mind flashed to Maris's stories about that old mill, how she'd laughed off her fear. I wasn't laughing. This was disturbing, like something out of a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The figure stopped, its head tilting, like it was listening. I held my breath, praying it hadn't seen me. The footsteps started again, joined by a second set, heavier, crunching on gravel. 2 of them now. My stomach twisted, a wave of fear washing over me. I thought about my van's layout. Could I climb to the back and hide under the bed? Dumb idea. If they got in, I'd be trapped. I needed to move, but where? The park was huge, all trails and woods, and I didn't know the layout. I remembered hiking in the Adirondacks once, getting lost for hours. That was bad, but this was worse. Something was hunting me, and I didn't know why. I grabbed my backpack, stuffing in essentials, water, a jacket, my phone, even though it was useless. The footsteps got closer, circling the van now. I heard a new sound, a low, raspy chuckle, like someone trying not to laugh. My blood ran cold. This wasn't random. They knew I was here. I thought about Maris again, wondering if she'd even made it to Utica. Had they gotten her first? The idea was too scary to dwell on, but it stuck, gnawing at me. I had to decide, stay and hide or make a break for it. Both felt like losing bets. As I crouched there, the chuckle turned into a whisper, not words, just a hiss, like air leaking from a tire. It was right outside the van, so close I could feel it through the walls. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. I clutched my multi-tool, my only weapon, and made a choice. I'd wait them out, just a little longer. Maybe they'd move on. But deep down, I knew that was wishful thinking. Something was out there, and it wasn't leaving. The park, the swings, the pavilion, it all felt alive, and I was caught in its web, waiting for the next move. The whisper outside my van turned into a low, guttural growl, and I nearly dropped my multi-tool. I'm Gideon Harlow, 34, from Albany, stuck in this nightmare of an abandoned park in Utica, my black van no longer feeling like a safe haven. The footsteps circling me stopped, and the silence was worse, like the calm before a storm. My heart was jackhammering, my breath shallow as I crouched low, peering through the van's window. The shadow by the pavilion was gone, but I could feel it. Those things were close, too close. The air was thick with that rusty, sour smell, and I knew something was horribly wrong. This wasn't just a creepy night. This was horror, real and breathing. I gripped my multi-tool, its knife blade out, and tried to steady my hands. The growling started again, closer now, right by the driver's side door. I bit my lip to keep from making a sound, my eyes darting to the locks. They were engaged, but the van felt flimsy, like tinfoil against whatever was out there. Then I saw it, a hand, pale and calloused, pressing against the window. No nails, just stubs, like they'd been chewed or torn off. My stomach lurched, a wave of terror hitting me. The hand slid down, leaving a smear of something dark, dirt or blood. I couldn't tell. I whispered, "Oh shit," my voice barely a breath. The growl turned into words, not clear, but human, raspy and wrong, like they were choking on each syllable. "Come out." My blood froze. I ducked lower, my mind racing. Who were they? Drifters? Cult freaks? I'd heard stories in Albany about weirdos in the woods, but this was next level scary. I thought about Maris, wondering if she'd run into these creeps. No way she'd be sketching now. The hand tapped the glass, slow and deliberate, like it was taunting me. Tap, tap, tap. Each one sent a jolt through my chest. I crawled to the back of the van, my knees scraping the floor. My bed was there, a thin mattress I could hide under, but that was a death trap. I needed a way out. The growling voice came again, joined by another, higher-pitched, almost giggling. 2 of them, at least. My flashlight was in my backpack, but turning it on would be like waving a flag. I peeked through the rear window and saw them. 3 figures now, standing in the open, maybe 15 feet away. They were tall, too thin, dressed in tattered coats, their faces hidden under hoods. One held a long, jagged blade, glinting in the moonlight. My heart stopped as the one with the blade turned toward the van, its hood slipping just enough to show a glimpse of its face, or what should have been a face. It was scarred, mangled, like someone had carved it up and stitched it wrong. I choked back a scream, the horror of it sinking in. These weren't just people. They were something else, something disturbing, like they'd crawled out of a nightmare. The scarred one pointed at my van, and the others moved, spreading out, circling closer. They knew I was here, and they weren't leaving. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped them. Start the van? Too loud. Run? They'd see me. I thought about this one time in Albany, when I dodged a mugger by ducking into an alley. Quick thinking saved me then. But this was different. These things were coordinated, like a pack. The scarred one stepped closer, its blade scraping the ground, that same metal-on-concrete sound I'd heard earlier. My skin crawled. I could hear their breathing now, ragged and wet, like they were sick or hungry. The van's side door rattled, someone testing the handle. I bit my fist, stifling a gasp. The growling voice was back, closer, right outside. "We see you," my vision blurred with panic. I grabbed my backpack, slinging it over my shoulder, and clutched the multi-tool. I had to move, but where? The park was a maze, trails, woods, that rusted playground. I pictured Maris out there, maybe hiding, maybe worse. The thought was a knife in my gut, but I couldn't help her if I didn't survive. A loud bang hit the van's roof, like something heavy landed on it. The whole frame shook, and I yelped, clapping a hand over my mouth. Footsteps thudded above me, slow and heavy, pacing. They were on the van. My mind screamed to do something, anything. I crawled to the driver's seat, keys in hand, ready to risk it all. But then I saw more movement outside. Another figure, shorter, dragging something across the grass. It looked like a body, limp and heavy. My heart sank, a sickening realization hitting me. Was that Maris? The scarred one was at the window now, its mangled face pressed close, those stitched-up features barely human. It tapped the blade against the glass, the sound sharp and final. I was trapped, surrounded, with nowhere to go. The horror was suffocating, my chest tight with fear. The footsteps on the roof stopped, and for a moment, everything was still. Then the rear door rattled, hard, like they were trying to rip it open. Something was clearly, horribly wrong, and I was out of time. The rear door of my van shook violently, metal groaning as those freaks tried to tear it open. I'm Gideon Harlow, 34, from Albany, and I was trapped in Roscoe Conkling Park in Utica, my heart pounding so hard I thought it had burst. The scarred figure's blade scraped the window, its mangled face glaring through the glass, while footsteps thudded on the roof. I clutched my multi-tool, its knife blade pathetic against these monsters. My keys were in my hand, and I made a split-second call, start the van and run. I jammed the key into the ignition, the engine roaring to life, and floored it. The van lurched, tires spinning on wet grass, and something heavy rolled off the roof with a thud. I swerved through the park, my headlights bouncing off rusted swings and tangled trees. In the rear view, I saw them, 3 figures, sprinting after me, their tattered coats flapping like vultures' wings. The scarred one was fastest, its blade glinting as it ran. My stomach churned with terror, the kind that makes your legs weak. I thought about a time in Albany when I'd outrun a stray dog. Scary, but nothing like this. These weren't animals. They were human, or close to it, and that made it worse. The van hit a rut, jarring my teeth, but I kept going, aiming for the park's exit. The road was narrow, overgrown with vines that slapped the windshield. My gas gauge was fine, but the park felt like a maze, trails twisting into darkness. I had no idea where I was going. Just away, anywhere but here. The figures were falling behind, but I heard their growls, that raspy "come back," echoing through the trees. My skin crawled. I pictured Maris, maybe the body I'd seen them dragging, and guilt stabbed me. Had I left her to die? The thought was too horrifying, but I couldn't stop now. I had to survive. A sign flashed in my headlights. Exit 0.5 miles. Hope surged, but then something slammed into the van's side. A rock, maybe, or worse. The impact shook me, the steering wheel jerking in my hands. I glanced in the mirror and saw them again, closer, moving through the trees like ghosts. How were they so fast? I pushed the van harder, the engine screaming, but the park seemed to fight me, branches scraping like claws. I remembered a night in the Adirondacks, getting stuck in mud. This felt like that, but 1,000 times scarier, a life or death chase. The exit came into view, a rusted gate half open. I aimed for it, but something darted across the path, a fourth figure, shorter, waving its arms. I swerved, the van skidding, and clipped a tree. The crunch of metal made my heart sink. The engine sputtered but held. I didn't stop, barreling through the gate, tires screeching onto a paved road. I checked the mirrors. Nothing, just darkness. Relief hit, but it was fragile. Those things were still out there, and I wasn't safe yet. The horror of their faces, especially that scarred one, burned in my mind. I drove a mile, maybe two, before the van started coughing, smoke rising from the hood. No, come on, I yelled, smacking the dash. It stalled, rolling to a stop on a deserted stretch of road. I grabbed my multi-tool and backpack, my hands shaking. The park was behind me, but the woods around felt just as threatening. I heard it then, footsteps, crunching leaves, coming from the trees. They'd followed me. My breath hitched, panic flooding back. I couldn't stay in the van, it was a trap now. I had to run. I bolted from the driver's seat, sprinting into the woods opposite the park. Branches tore at my jacket, my sneakers slipping on wet leaves. The growling was back, closer, mixed with that high-pitched giggle. My lungs burned, but I kept going, dodging trees, my flashlight long gone. I thought about Maris's sketches, how she'd draw this, jagged lines, dark shapes. The idea of her out here, maybe dead, pushed me faster. The footsteps were gaining, their raspy voices calling my name now. Gideon, how did they know? The terror was suffocating. I stumbled into a clearing, my legs ready to give out. A rusted shed sat in the middle, door ajar, like a faint hope. I ran for it, diving inside, and slammed the door, shoving a crate against it. The shed smelled of mold and oil, but it was cover. I crouched, clutching my multi-tool, listening. The footsteps stopped outside, replaced by scratching, like nails on wood. My heart was a jackhammer. I'd escaped the van, but I was cornered again, the danger closer than ever. They were out there, waiting, and I had nowhere left to run. The scratching grew louder, joined by that guttural growl, now a chant. I peeked through a crack in the shed's wall and saw them. 4 figures, circling like wolves. The scarred one led, its blade dragging, sparking on the ground. My chest tightened, the horror overwhelming. I thought I could outrun them, but they were relentless, hunting me like prey. The shed's walls felt thin, ready to collapse. I needed a plan, but my mind was blank, consumed by fear. They were coming, and I was running out of time. The shed's walls creaked as the scratching turned to pounding, each hit shaking dust from the rafters. I'm Gideon Harlow, 34, from Albany, and I was trapped in this rotting shed outside Utica, my breath ragged, my multi-tool useless in my shaking hand. The scarred figure's blade scraped the door, a screech that made my teeth hurt. The others chanted my name, their voices a sick chorus, low, raspy, and that giggling one, high and unhinged. I pressed against the back wall, searching for anything, a weapon, an exit. There was a rusty shovel, but it was no match for them. The horror of it sank in. I was going to die here, alone, in this forgotten corner of New York. I grabbed the shovel, my hands slick with sweat, and scanned the shed. A small, broken window was high on the wall. Maybe I could climb through. I dragged a crate over, my movements frantic, and stood on it, peering out. The figures were still circling, but the scarred one was at the door, hacking at it with its blade. Splinters flew, the wood giving way. My heart sank. I'd made it out of the van, but coming here was a mistake, a deadly one. The window was my only shot, but it was narrow, and I'd have to move fast. I shoved the shovel through the window, breaking the last shards of glass, and started climbing. The frame cut my hands, blood dripping, but I didn't care. The door splintered behind me, the scarred one's growl louder, almost inside. I squeezed through, half falling onto the wet ground outside. The air was cold, that rusty smell choking me. I ran, clutching the shovel, my legs burning. The woods were thick, branches snapping at my face like they were alive. I heard them behind me, crashing through the trees, their chant now a scream. The terror was a weight, crushing me. I tripped over a root, the shovel flying from my hands. I scrambled up, but they were close, too close. The giggling one was fastest, its hooded figure darting through the trees like a shadow. I thought of Maris, that body they dragged. Was it her? The guilt was a knife, twisting deeper. I'd left her behind, focused on saving myself. Now, I was out of options, the woods closing in. I spotted a ravine ahead, steep and dark, a faint chance to hide. I sprinted for it, sliding down the muddy slope, landing hard in a stream. The cold water shocked me, soaking my jeans, but I crouched low, praying the ravine would hide me. The figures reached the edge above, their shadows looming. The scarred one raised its blade, pointing like it could smell me. My heart stopped. I'd thought the shed was my mistake, but this was worse, trapping myself in a ditch with no way out. I pressed against the muddy bank, the water numbing my legs, and held my breath. The giggling one laughed again, sharp and cruel, like it knew I was done. They started down the ravine, slow and deliberate, their boots splashing in the stream. I crawled backward, my hands slipping in the mud, searching for anything to fight with. My fingers found a rock, heavy and sharp. It wasn't much, but it was something. I stood, legs shaking, and hurled it at the giggling one, hitting its shoulder. It stumbled, but the others didn't flinch, closing in like a pack. The scarred one lunged, its blade slicing the air, catching my arm. Pain exploded, blood mixing with the water. I screamed, swinging wildly, but they were on me. Hands grabbed me, cold and rough, dragging me down. I kicked, clawed, but there were too many. The scarred one loomed over me, its mangled face inches from mine, those stitched eyes empty. Its blade pressed against my chest, slow, like it was savoring it. I thought of Albany, my van's starry mural, Maris's sketches, my life, slipping away. The horror was total, a black wave drowning me. I'd run, fought, but it wasn't enough. The ravine, the shed, the park, all traps leading to this tragic end. The blade plunged, sharp and final, and pain swallowed everything. My vision blurred, the chanting fading to a dull roar. I saw Maris's face in my mind, her goofy smile from that Vanlife meetup. Maybe she'd made it, maybe not. I'd never know. The figures kept chanting, their hands tearing at me, the stream running red. My last breath was a gasp, the cold water pulling me under. 3 years on the road, chasing freedom, and it ended here, in a muddy grave, surrounded by monsters who knew my name. The tragedy wasn't just mine. It was Maris's, maybe others who'd parked in that cursed park. Roscoe Conkling was a trap, a place that swallowed people whole. My van, my home, sat abandoned somewhere, its stars fading. I'd wanted solitude, but I found something far worse, something cruel, human, and unstoppable. As the darkness took me, the scarred one's blade glinted one last time, a final, disturbing mark of my failure to escape. The tires of my van crunched over broken glass as I pulled into the deserted parking lot of an old strip mall in Schenectady, New York. I'm Soren Vale, 31 years old, from Buffalo, about a 4-hour drive west. The mall was a relic, shuttered stores with faded signs for Radio Shack and a nail salon, their windows dark and boarded. It was pushing midnight, the sky a dull gray, and I needed a spot to crash after a long drive. My converted Chevy Express, decked out with a bed and solar panels, was my home for 2 years of van life. This lot seemed quiet, hidden behind a row of dying pines. But as I killed the engine, a chill ran through me, like the place was watching. I stepped out, my boots scuffing the cracked asphalt. The air smelled of damp concrete, and something bitter, like old trash. The van's gray paint blended into the shadows, parked near a rusted dumpster. I was meeting my friend Cal, a 35-year-old welder from Albany I'd met at a campground last year. He was a big guy, all tattoos and loud laughs, always up for an adventure. I texted him, "Yo, I'm here. This lot's creepy as hell." No reply yet. Cal was usually quick to respond, but he'd been driving all day too. I figured he was close. Inside the van, I flicked on my string lights, their soft glow bouncing off the wood-paneled walls I'd built myself. My setup was cozy, a mattress, a tiny fridge, and a shelf of sci-fi comics. But tonight, the lights didn't help. The lot outside felt too empty, too still. I cracked a window for air, hearing only the faint hum of distant traffic. Schenectady wasn't exactly the middle of nowhere, but this strip mall felt cut off, like it didn't belong. I muttered, "Get it together, Soren," trying to shake the uneasy vibe. I'd parked in weird spots before, truck stops, desert flats. This was no big deal, right? I grabbed a can of soup and heated it on my stove, the hiss of the burner grounding me. But my eyes kept drifting to the windows. The strip mall's storefronts loomed, their boarded windows like closed eyes. I thought about Cal, how he'd probably roll in blasting metal music, making fun of me for being jumpy. But the longer I waited, the more the silence got to me. It was heavy, like a blanket I couldn't shake off. I checked my phone again. No bars, no signal. Great, I groaned, tossing it onto the bed. This place was giving me horror movie vibes. I stepped outside to check the lot, my flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The dumpster was overflowing, plastic bags fluttering like ghosts. A faded sign read, "No overnight parking," but I'd ignored worse. Vanlife was about bending rules. Still, my gut twisted, that disturbing feeling creeping in. I shone the light across the lot, catching a flicker of movement near the old nail salon. Just a rat, I told myself, like the ones I'd seen in Buffalo alleys. But it moved too slow, too big. I froze, my breath catching, then laughed it off. "You're paranoid, man." Back in the van, I locked the doors and tried to focus on my soup. The string lights flickered, probably a loose wire, but it made my heart skip. I thought about Cal's stories. He'd once camped near an old factory and swore he heard voices. I'd called him a liar, but now I wasn't so sure. The lot outside was too quiet, the pines blocking any streetlights. I grabbed my pocket knife, a habit from years on the road, and set it on the counter. Just in case. You never know what's out there, especially in a place like this. I tried reading one of my comics, but the panels blurred, my eyes darting to the windows. The lot felt alive, like it was waiting for something. I remembered a night in Buffalo, parking near a warehouse and feeling watched. Turned out to be a security guard, no big deal. But this was different, scarier somehow. I texted Cal again. "Dude, where you at? This place is freaking me out." The message didn't send, stuck in limbo. I cursed under my breath, frustration mixing with nerves. The van's walls felt thinner tonight, like they couldn't keep the world out. I turned off the string lights to save battery, plunging the interior into near darkness. My phone's glow was my only light, and it wasn't enough. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the dumpster's lid. It sounded like something banging, slow and rhythmic. I leaned toward the window, squinting, and saw it again. That flicker of movement, closer now, near the pines. My pulse quickened, a shiver of horror running through me. It wasn't a rat. I gripped my pocket knife, my knuckles white, and listened. The banging stopped, replaced by a low hum, like someone muttering under their breath. It was coming from the strip mall, maybe the nail salon. My skin prickled. I told myself it was just the wind, but deep down, I knew better. Something was out there, and it wasn't Cal. The lot, the pines, the boarded-up stores, they all felt wrong, like I'd parked in a trap. I just didn't know how bad it was yet. That low hum from the strip mall sent a chill down my spine, like someone was whispering just out of earshot. I'm Soren Vale, 31, from Buffalo, parked in this sketchy lot in Schenectady, my van feeling more like a target than a home. My pocket knife was in my hand, its blade flipped out, but it felt like a toy against whatever was out there. Cal still hadn't texted, and my phone was useless. No signal, just a blank screen mocking me. I had to decide, stay put and hope Cal showed or get the hell out of this creepy parking lot. The hum stopped, but the silence was worse, thick and heavy, like the air was holding its breath. I peeked through the van's window, my heart thumping. The pines at the edge of the lot swayed, but the movement I'd seen near them was gone. Maybe it was nothing, just my nerves playing tricks, like that time in Buffalo when I thought a shadow was a prowler, but it was just a stray cat. But this felt different, more disturbing. I tried the radio, hoping for some noise to calm me down. Nothing but static, hissing like a busted pipe. I smacked it off, muttering, "Come on, Cal, don't leave me hanging." The idea of him stuck in traffic felt like a lie I couldn't believe. I grabbed my flashlight, keeping it off for now, and checked the locks again. The strip mall's boarded storefronts loomed outside, their shadows sharp in the moonlight. I thought about driving to a brighter spot, maybe a 24-hour diner, but Cal was supposed to be here, and I didn't want to ditch him. He'd never let me live it down, cracking jokes about me running from ghosts. But as I sat there, the hum started again, closer, coming from the nail salon's direction. My stomach twisted. It wasn't the wind. This was too steady, too human. I slid low in my seat, my breath shallow, and listened. The hum turned into a scrape, like something dragging across concrete, slow and deliberate. My mind flashed to Cal's story about that factory, how he'd heard footsteps and laughed it off. I wasn't laughing. This was scary, like something out of a horror flick I'd never signed up for. I leaned toward the window, squinting, and saw it. A shadow, tall and lanky, moving behind the dumpster. My heart skipped. It wasn't Cal. He's a big guy, broad shoulders. This was thin, wrong, like it didn't move right. I clutched my pocket knife tighter, my palms sweaty. Should I start the van? The noise would give me away, but staying felt like asking for trouble. I thought about climbing to the back, hiding under my bed, but that was a dead end if something got in. The scraping stopped, and for a moment, I thought maybe I was safe. Then I heard footsteps, light, uneven, circling the van. My skin crawled. I whispered, "Shit, shit, shit," trying to keep my cool. I'd parked in rough spots before, but this was next level creepy, like the lot itself was alive and pissed off. I grabbed my backpack, stuffing in my phone and a water bottle, just in case I had to bolt. The footsteps got closer, now on the driver's side. I froze, holding my breath, praying they'd pass. Then something tapped the window, soft, like a finger testing the glass. My heart slammed against my ribs. I ducked lower, my mind racing. I remembered a night in Buffalo, hearing noises outside my apartment, turn out to be kids messing around. But this wasn't kids. This was something else, something disturbing that made my gut scream to run. I peeked over the dashboard, barely breathing. The shadow was still there, near the dumpster, but now there were two. Another figure, shorter, crouched low. They weren't moving like normal people, more like animals stalking prey. The taller one held something, maybe a stick or a pipe, glinting faintly. Horror washed over me, cold and sharp. I thought about Cal, wondering if he'd even made it to Schenectady. Had he run into these creeps? The idea was too awful, but it stuck, gnawing at me. The tapping on the window stopped, replaced by a low chuckle, raspy and wrong. My blood ran cold. They knew I was here. I considered starting the van, but the engine's roar would be a beacon. Hide or fight, that was my choice, and neither felt good. I slid to the floor, my back against the seat, and checked my phone again. Still no signal. The footsteps circled closer, now at the rear door. I gripped my knife, my hands shaking. Whatever was out there wasn't leaving, and I was running out of time. As I crouched there, the chuckle turned into a whisper. Not words, just a hiss, like steam escaping. It was right outside, so close I could feel it through the van's walls. My pulse was deafening, my mind screaming to do something. I thought about Cal's big laugh, how he'd probably tell me to chill. But this wasn't a joke. The strip mall, the pines, the shadows, they were closing in, and I was caught in something scary, something I couldn't explain. The whispers grew louder, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they made their move. The hiss outside my van turned into a low, guttural snarl, and my heart nearly stopped. I'm Soren Vale, 31, from Buffalo, trapped in this godforsaken parking lot in Schenectady, my grave end feeling like a coffin. The shadows by the dumpster were moving closer, their footsteps crunching on broken glass, deliberate and slow. My pocket knife was clenched in my fist, its blade out, but it felt like a toothpick against whatever was out there. Cal still hadn't shown, and my phone was dead. No signal, no hope. The air was thick with that bitter, trashy smell, but now it had a new edge, like sweat and something sour. Something was horribly wrong, and the horror was closing in. I ducked low, my breath shaky, peering through the van's window. The taller shadow stepped into the moonlight, and I stifled a gasp. It was human, but barely. Its face was wrapped in dirty bandages, only one eye visible, glinting like a predator's. The shorter one followed, its head twitching, hands clutching a rusty crowbar. My stomach lurched, terror gripping me. These weren't drifters or punks. They were something else, something scary, like they'd crawled out of a nightmare. The bandaged one tilted its head, like it could hear my heartbeat, and pointed at my van. The snarl came again, closer, right by the passenger door. Out, it rasped, the word slurred, like its mouth wasn't right. My blood ran cold. I thought about Cal, his big frame and bigger laugh. Where the hell was he? I pictured him stuck on the highway, oblivious, while I was here, surrounded. The bandaged one tapped its crowbar against the dumpster, a slow, mocking rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Each hit sent a jolt through me, like a countdown. I'd heard noises in Buffalo before, drunks, raccoons, but this was different, a disturbing kind of wrong that made my skin crawl. I slid to the floor, my back against the seat, trying to think. The van's locks were solid, but the windows felt flimsy, like they could shatter any second. I thought about starting the engine, but the noise would be a dead giveaway. The shorter one moved closer, its twitchy movements making my heart race. I caught a glimpse of its face, scarred, one ear missing, like it had been chewed off. My breath hitched, the horror sinking in. These people were mangled, broken, like they'd been through something awful and come out worse. And now they were after me. A loud bang hit the van's side, rocking it. I yelped, clapping a hand over my mouth. The bandaged one was at the window now, its single eye staring through the glass, unblinking. I froze, my pocket knife trembling in my hand. "See you," it growled, its voice like gravel. My mind screamed to do something. Run, fight, hide, but I was paralyzed. I remembered a night in Buffalo, hearing a break-in at a neighbor's place. I called the cops, safe in my apartment. No cops here, no help, just me and these freaks. The rear door rattled, hard, like they were trying to pry it open. I scrambled to the driver's seat, keys in hand, my pulse deafening. Another figure appeared, third one, taller, lumbering, holding a chain that clinked as it moved. My chest tightened, panic choking me. 3 of them now, circling, their snarls mixing into a sick chant. I thought about Cal's stories, how he'd laughed off creepy nights. I wasn't laughing. This was real, terrifying, and they weren't stopping. The bandaged one smashed its crowbar against the window, cracking it, and I knew I was out of time. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so bad I dropped them. Shit, I hissed, diving to the floor to grab them. The van rocked again, another bang, this time from the roof. Footsteps thudded above me, heavy and slow, like they were pacing. My heart was a jackhammer, my vision blurring. I thought about Maris from that other night, how I'd worried about her. Was Cal out there, dragged off like that body I'd feared was hers? The idea was too grim, but it fueled my panic. The bandaged one's eye was still on me, like it was enjoying this. The chain-wielding one started circling closer, its links scraping the asphalt. I heard a new sound, a low, wet cough, like someone choking. It was coming from the nail salon, its boarded windows now glowing faintly, like a fire inside. My stomach dropped. More of them. The horror was overwhelming, a weight crushing me. I grabbed the keys, ready to start the van, but the rear door groaned, metal bending. They were getting in. I had seconds to act, and every choice felt like a trap. As I gripped the ignition, the bandaged one slammed its crowbar again, the window spiderwebbing. The chant grew louder, their voices blending into something inhuman. I saw movement by the pines, another figure, dragging something heavy across the lot. My heart sank. It looked like a body, limp and still. Cal. The thought was a knife, sharp and tragic. Something was clearly, horribly wrong, and I was caught in the middle, my van surrounded, my options gone. They were coming for me, and I didn't know why. The van's window shattered, glass spraying across my lap as the bandaged figure's crowbar swung again. I'm Soren Vale, 31, from Buffalo, trapped in this nightmare parking lot in Schenectady, my heart pounding like a drum. The scarred one and the chain wielder closed in, their snarls filling the air, while that faint glow from the nail salon flickered like a warning. I jammed the key into the ignition, the engine roaring to life, and floored it. The van lurched forward, tires screeching on asphalt, clipping the dumpster with a sickening crunch. I didn't care. I had to get out before those freaks tore me apart. My headlights swept the lot, catching the bandaged one sprinting after me, its single eye glinting with rage. The scarred one was faster, darting through the pines, its crowbar raised. My stomach churned with terror, the kind that makes your hands shake. I thought about a time in Buffalo, dodging a carjacker by peeling out of an alley. Dumb luck saved me then. This wasn't luck. These things were hunting me, their movements too coordinated, too hungry. I swerved toward the lot's exit, the van rattling over potholes, praying I'd make it to the road. The exit was close, a gap in the pines leading to a dark street. But the chain-wielder was there, swinging its links across the path. I yanked the wheel, narrowly missing it, the van fishtailing. The rear view showed all three figures running, their tattered coats flapping like vultures. The bandaged one threw something, a rock, maybe, smashing into my tailgate. The impact shook me, but I kept going, hitting the street at 60, the engine screaming. My heart was in my throat, horror driving me forward. I checked for Cal's van. Nothing. Was he the body I'd seen them dragging? The thought was too grim. The road stretched dark, no streetlights, just my headlights slicing through the night. I pushed the van to 70, the frame shaking. I remembered a night in Buffalo, outrunning a storm, the thrill of it. This was no thrill, this was a life or death chase. The figures were gone from my mirrors, but I didn't trust it. They'd been too fast, too relentless. The glow from the nail salon stuck in my mind, like a beacon for something worse. I needed a plan, find a gas station, a cop, anything. But my phone was still dead, and the gas gauge was dipping low. A mile out, the van sputtered, the engine coughing like it was choking. "No, come on," I yelled, smacking the dash. It stalled, rolling to a stop on a deserted stretch of road, pines looming on both sides. My hands shook as I grabbed my pocket knife and backpack. The lot was behind me, but the woods felt just as bad, like they were part of the trap. Then I heard it, footsteps, crunching leaves, coming from the trees. My blood ran cold. They'd followed me. How? I didn't see them on the road, but their snarls were back, that raspy out, echoing through the dark. I bolted from the van, clutching my knife, and sprinted into the woods. Branches tore at my jacket, my sneakers slipping on wet pine needles. The snarls grew louder, mixed with that wet cough from the salon. My lungs burned, but I kept running, dodging trees, my mind racing. I thought about Cal, his big laugh, how he'd probably tell me to fight. But fight what? These weren't people, not really. They were something scary, something wrong. The footsteps were gaining, their chains clinking, their voices chanting my name now. Soren. The horror of it was paralyzing. I stumbled into a clearing, my legs shaking. A derelict shed sat in the middle, its door hanging off hinges. A slim chance. I dove inside, shoving the door shut and piling crates against it. The shed stank of rot and gasoline, but it was cover. I crouched, gripping my knife, my breath ragged. The footsteps stopped outside, replaced by scratching, like claws on wood. My heart hammered. I'd escaped the van, but this shed was another cage. The bandaged one's voice came through the wall, low and guttural. "We find you." I was running out of places to hide. The scratching turned to banging, the crates shaking with each hit. I scanned the shed, rusted tools, a broken window, no real weapons. The chain-wielder's links rattled outside, circling, while the scarred one's crowbar scraped the door. My mind flashed to Cal. Had they got him first? The guilt was a weight, but I had to focus. I crawled to the window, peering out. The figures were everywhere, their shadows twisting in the moonlight. The glow from the salon was gone, but a new light flickered in the woods, like a fire. My gut sank. More of them. I clutched my knife, my only defense, and braced for the door to give. The banging grew frantic, the wood splintering. I'd thought I could outrun them, but they were relentless, their chance a sick rhythm. The shed was a trap, and I was cornered, the terror overwhelming. I needed a miracle, but all I had was a shaky blade and a prayer. The door cracked, the bandaged one's eye glinting through the gap, and I knew I was out of time. They were coming, and there was nowhere left to run. The shed's door splintered, the bandaged one's crowbar prying it open, its single eye locked on me. I'm Soren Vale, 31, from Buffalo, and I was trapped in this rotting shed outside Schenectady, my pocket knife trembling in my hand. The scarred one and the chain wielder were outside, their snarls blending into a chant that made my skin crawl. The air was thick with that sour, sweaty stench, now mixed with something coppery, blood. My heart was a jackhammer, my vision blurring with panic. I'd run from the van, from the lot. But coming here was a mistake, a deadly one. The shed was my last stand, and it wasn't enough. I backed against the wall, my eyes darting for an out. The broken window was too small to climb through, the crates too flimsy to hold them back. I grabbed a rusted wrench from the floor, heavier than my knife, and gripped it tight. The door gave way, the bandaged one stepping through, its crowbar dripping with something dark. My stomach heaved, horror choking me. "Stay back," I yelled, swinging the wrench, but it laughed, a raspy, broken sound. The scarred one followed, its earless face twitching, while the chain wielder swung its links, the metal glinting like a promise. I swung the wrench again, catching the scarred one's arm. It grunted but didn't stop, its crowbar slashing down, grazing my shoulder. Pain flared, blood soaking my jacket. I stumbled back, tripping over a crate, and hit the floor hard. The bandaged one loomed over me, its eye gleaming with something like joy. I thought of Cal, his tattoos, his laugh. Had they dragged him off, like that body in the lot? The guilt was a knife, sharper than the pain. I'd left him behind, focused on saving myself, and now I was paying for it. I scrambled up, clutching the wrench, and lunged for the window, smashing it wider with a desperate swing. Glass cut my hands, but I didn't care. I had to get out. I dove through, landing hard on the ground, the air cold and sharp. The woods were dark, the firelight from earlier now closer, flickering through the trees. I ran, my shoulder throbbing, blood dripping down my arm. Their footsteps pounded behind me, the chains clinked like a death knell. I thought of Buffalo, my van's cozy interior, the comics I'd never finish. The horror was total, a black wave drowning me. I tripped again, my ankle twisting on a root. I hit the ground, the wrench slipping from my hand. They were on me in seconds, hands grabbing my arms, my legs, dragging me toward the firelight. I screamed, kicking, but they were too strong. The bandaged one raised its crowbar, the scarred one's face inches from mine, its scars like a map of pain. The chain wielder wrapped its links around my wrist, yanking tight, cutting into my skin. My mind flashed to a night in Buffalo, hiding from a storm in my van, safe, warm. Now, I was anything but. The firelight grew brighter, revealing more figures. 5, maybe 6, their faces hidden, their hands holding knives, pipes, things that gleamed. The bandaged one shoved me to my knees, the ground wet with mud and something slicker, blood. My heart stopped. In the fire's glow, I saw it, a pile of clothes, boots, a familiar jacket. Cal's. My chest caved, a tragic weight crushing me. He hadn't made it. I'd run, but I'd led them right to me, my every choice a step toward this end. The bandaged one raised its crowbar, its eye locked on mine, like it was savoring the moment. I swung my knife, a last desperate act, but the chain wielder yanked my arm, the blade falling uselessly. The crowbar came down, crashing into my chest, pain exploding like a bomb. I gasped, blood filling my mouth, my vision fading. The chant grew louder, their voices a sick hymn. I thought of my van, my starry nights, my life on the road. It was all gone, swallowed by this disturbing nightmare. They didn't stop, their hands tearing at me, the chain tightening, the knives glinting. My last thought was of Cal, his laugh silenced, his body somewhere in that pile. The strip mall, the shed, the woods, they were traps, and I'd walked right into them. The crowbar struck again, and the world went dark, the firelight fading to nothing. My van life dream, my freedom, ended in blood and mud, a tragedy carved by monsters who knew my name. The pain was gone, but so was I. The lot, the pines, the fire, they'd claimed us both, me and Cal, and who knows how many others. Schenectady's abandoned strip mall wasn't just empty. It was alive, hungry, and we were its prey. My van sat somewhere, cold and empty, a relic of a life cut short by something cruel, human, and unstoppable.